2021.
Thanks, Camila. So that's gonna, can you hear her? So that's gonna take us to the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm gonna ask Captain Williams.
Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jennifer, will you please call a roll?
Councilmember Avila,
Here.
Councilmember Beaver,
Here.
Councilmember Thorpe,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Duncan,
Here.
Mayor Vogt.
Here. So that is going to take us to an employee introduction, and I believe this is for, is this Ben?
All right. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. It is with great pleasure I introduce a new member to the Planning Division team, Mr. Christian Farmer. He is our new assistant planner that's working on a variety of different projects, including conditional use permits, tentative maps, planning use permits, and then other land use entitlements, also preparing and presenting at the Planning Commission already, and then also doing plan chats for a variety of different small projects that people are doing through building and safety. As part of it, he is a relatively recent graduate from UC Santa Barbara, majoring in environmental studies, and then prior to joining the city of Yucaipa, he worked both full-time as a GIS technician and also simultaneously had an internship with the city of Claremont in their planning division as well. And then he is also a newlywed with his wife and enjoys working or doing activities and hobbies outdoors, including biking, camping, and just being in nature. He does note that he's excited for the challenges that comes with a city like Yucaipa. And then one of the things that I have appreciated with his work is both his strong work ethic, so him working essentially 2 jobs to get into the field has certainly carried over into his full-time employment, and he's certainly very responsive to applicants, goes, I think, out of his way to make sure that he gives resources to them, provide comments to them so that they can make quick submittals on their projects and keep the process moving. And then certainly his collaboration with the planning team. So now I have 2 assistant planners. Him and then Madeline both work effectively together and provide good customer service to the counter, and then certainly helping project applicants, and then working through project ideas to make sure that solutions to potential challenges are addressed and we can find ways for applicants to move forward effectively. So certainly very happy to have him on our team and want to introduce him to the city.
Welcome, Christian.
Thank you for that, Ben. I couldn't be more excited to be here tonight. I'm really excited to be working for a city that's growing like Yucaipa is, coming from a relatively slow-growing Claremont. It's been a world of change, and it's awesome to see so many applicants and the kind of change in the community. It's very cool.
All right, we're going to have our picture taken with you. Is that okay? You can go ahead and invite your wife if you'd like to.
Thank you.
Okay, so that takes us to public comment, and I do have 3 speaker slips. And our first one will be Randy Balling. And for the record, Randy, we do have a 3-minute time limit. And I'd ask if you'd state where you're from.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and staff. My name is Randy Balling, and I'm the pastor of Grace Point Fellowship Church, located here on the Yucaipa Boulevard. I'm here with Devonna Dre. She is our children's minister and a child advocate. I've come here to offer our heartfelt thanks for last year's official proclamation that the month of January has been declared National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month in our beautiful city of Yucaipa. So here's the proclamation. So we thank you guys for that as a church. Part of the proclamation encourages our citizens to recognize the vital role that we can play to make a difference to prevent human trafficking. Grace Point Church, with the help of other local churches in our city, has taken the lead by holding 2 events that we call Rescue Sundays. These events are designed to inform our community, parents, and community leaders on how they can help protect children and prevent human trafficking. The horrors of human trafficking are often disassociated with our own community. Many view child sex trafficking as something that happens in faraway countries and assume such illicit solicitations are not a palpable problem in our own nation. But the reality is, according to the U.S. Department of Justice, the United States remains the largest producer and consumer of child abuse content in the world. And according to our own Human Trafficking Awareness Committee with the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, the problem of online exploitation of children in our own community has only grown worse day by day. However, in spite of the increase of this victimization, we will remain vigilant for the sake of bringing victory to child victims trapped in the horrors of human trafficking. To this end, Grace Point is continuing our efforts by holding our 3rd Rescue Sunday event on September 26th. This will be another collaborative effort with other churches, and we hope that community leaders such as yourselves will consider coming and attending. We want to leave 5 pamphlets here for you to consider, and I want to give the rest of my time to Devonna, our children's minister, to just share a few of the details with you about this next Rescue Sunday event.
All right.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you so much for this time. I would like to just encourage you to consider this event as something we are doing on behalf of this city. It has been recognized all over the country through social media what we are doing here in Yucaipa. This event we are hosting is a summit with 4 amazing speakers, starting with Deputy Greg Jones, the San Bernardino County head of human trafficking and awareness. And he's an amazing man with incredible information to share with us. Our next event in January, I will let you know, we have a former FBI of 40 years victim advocate as one of our speakers from Washington, D.C., and we are expanding this event with every single time that we do it. So we encourage you to come. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Harry Barber.
Hello, Mayor, City Council.
Harry, could you speak into the microphone? Can you speak into the microphone right here?
Oh.
There you go.
Sorry about that. My name is Harry Barber. I live in Washington, Utah. We've been trying to put a project together in the city of Yucaipa for over a year. We tried to put a manufactured home on a piece of property, which was $89,000 when we started. Today, it is at $147,000. I came to the city to pull permits a year ago. The permits were $2,000. A month ago, I came back and it was $3,325. And they said we had an impact fee of $15,000. We're trying to put it together for my girlfriend's daughter that is disabled. And I'd like to know if you can have some consideration in this matter. I thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Harry. We'll go ahead, and if you can send me an email, can you get on the city website?
I don't do email.
No?
I'm told for this.
Leave your contact information with some of our staff, and
All right.
I'll get in touch with you.
I appreciate it so much. Thank
Okay.
you for your time.
All right. Bill Johnston.
Hello, guys. How you doing? My name is Bill Johnston. I'm a plumbing contractor here in town, and I got a customer that was given a violation for having a washer and dryer on their porch. And they told me it needed to be put into a shed with having electrical hardwired, which I hired an electrician and everything, did that for us. Called for inspection, and now they are wanting a plumber's permit, which is an additional $280, and my customer does not have the money to do so. So I'm asking for your guys' help.
Okay, but you gonna say something?
Yeah, so in this situation, I think I've already talked to staff about this, is he came in to get a permit for electric, he was violated for having a washer and dryer outside, and then they got a permit to move it inside, electrical permit, and then when he got done and got the inspection, they needed another permit, which they didn't tell him about, and she doesn't have the money, and I said, just come ask for some relief from city council.
I'm going to say that this is not the forum at this juncture to make that kind of decision. I think we should try to meet with staff and work to resolve. And then if that can't be, then we need to bring it back to the city council as a forum of appeal, and then we can make a decision at that juncture. But we need to give staff every opportunity to work with you. And failing that, then you can bring your appeal to city council, and then we can adjudicate from there.
Okay. So then I just need to come back in and talk to building and safety in the morning?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, yeah. And I would like to know the progress personally, and I'm sure Mayor Pro Tem Duncan would also like to know the progress and if there was any resolution.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I agree with what you said. All right, so that takes us to, do we have any more public comment, Jennifer? Is that it?
That's it for general public comment.
Okay. So that takes us to the consent agenda. Are there, in the consent agenda are items 1 through 8. Is there anything on the consent that one wishes to remove?
I'd like to remove item number 8 and discuss it.
Okay. So,
Go ahead, I'd like to recommend approval of the remaining items in consent.
I'll second.
all right, so we have a motion and a second for items 1 through 7. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so let's take that one first. Item number 8, auditing services extension. You know what we could do? Let's go ahead and move to item number 9, and then we'll let you get your bearings, if that's okay. So, all right. Well, that takes us to mayor and council business reports. Is there anything, John, do you have anything? No. David?
No.
No.
No. Justin? Okay. So let's just go ahead and let's tackle number 9 first. And this is, I believe, this is Jennifer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. This item before you is a 2021 Annual League Conference and resolution packet. The League Annual Conference will be held on Wednesday, September 22nd through September 24th at the Sacramento Convention Center. The conference includes the annual business meeting, which will take place on Friday at 12:30. A voting delegate must be selected, in addition to an alternate, to vote on the 2 resolutions before you this evening. And if we don't have an interested council member willing to attend, you can also designate a city staff to represent the city as the voting delegate. This evening, we handed out 2 documents. We received an email on Friday from the League that due to the surge of the COVID-19 Delta variant, those attending the conference will be required to provide proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test result within 24 hours of entry into the conference. The 2 resolutions that are being proposed for consideration is number 1, which calls for the legislation that provides a fair and equitable distribution of the Bradley Burns 1% sales tax from in-state online purchases based on data where products are shipped to, and that rightfully take into consideration the impacts that fulfillment centers have on host cities, but also provides a fair share to California cities that do not and/or cannot have fulfillment centers within their jurisdiction. Also distributed to you tonight, we did get a letter from the city of Rancho Cucamonga requesting your support on this resolution. The second reso calls for the governor and the legislature to provide adequate regulatory authority and necessary funding to assist cities with railroad right-of-way areas to address the illegal dumping, graffiti, and homeless encampments along the rail lines and result in public safety issues. The recommendation before you this evening is that you appoint a delegate and an alternate for the business meeting and consider the two resolutions that are before you. That's all I have at this time.
All right, is there anyone here who wishes to attend the League of Cities Conference? David?
Yes, and I can provide whatever they need to show I'm safe and sane.
All right. Is there a second, is there room for two, or?
You
It's
can
two.
have a delegate and an alternate.
Yeah, is anyone else, would anyone else like to go? Justin? You good? Ray?
We do have reservations for two, which you can't get a hotel room anymore, but for the conference, but I'm happy to attend if no other council members are interested.
Okay, so we have David and Ray. All right, so that's number one, and
I'm
number.
sorry on that, for the minutes, can I get a motion in a second?
I'll make the motion for David and Ray.
Okay,
What is this for?
for item number one, the voting delegate and alternate.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so that takes us to item number two, which are what they plan on voting for at the League of Cities Conference. Any comments? Questions?
This is a motion to approve the
We need a,
one or two
yeah, we
resolution?
need a motion to accept item number two, A and B, or unless you choose not to.
You may elect to abstain as well. That's
With respect to item A, with the local sales tax, I think we have nothing to lose by saying yes. This is to our benefit, whether we are actually the recipients of direct sales tax from the vendor or the distribution center or not. We stand to gain some revenue regardless. And I don't see any reason why, when you read the resolution, and you'll find that pretty much a no-brainer. I think the league is supporting that. I can't find right now what their position is on the second one. Ray, can you?
Well, that's the purpose for the item, is whether council wishes to vote for the two resolutions that are being put forth for the league's consideration. So there isn't a league position at this point.
Okay.
Just consider it a staff report for league, ultimate league board consideration, or league membership consideration.
And anyway, as your potential representative, I would encourage us to consider yes for A, and for B, it has to do with kicking the homeless out of the right-of-way and the illegal dumping along the rail lines. It doesn't affect us personally, but the downstream effects might be we get an influx of homeless away from the rail lines and maybe into our town.
Is the state wanting to keep that 1% for other purposes? I mean, don't we normally get a certain percentage of that?
We don't. I think we get, if, for example, Amazon has a distribution center, we get a portion of the sales tax. And if we don't have Amazon, I don't think we get a portion right now. Is that correct?
So as it stands today, there are several of those types of online sales vendors, if you will, Amazon being one of them, that their point of sale sales tax goes through the county pool.
There it is, that's right.
And so as a part of the county pool, the city does get a share of that. And so this legislation, this proposal by the League of Cities that may ripen to legislation, creates a formula for splitting that, because there are some continuing to split that between the city where the warehouse might be located, the online sales warehouse might be located, and other cities that are also impacted in terms of, the services. And so that's the intent of this League of Cities resolution, is to create that formula as it stands today. And part of the reason for that is there's some statewide conversation about changing the formula that is now being used for pursuant to the county pool. And so this would ultimately propose legislation that would set that in concrete, if you will, the county pool formula for sharing between cities that house a online warehouse distribution center and cities that are impacted by such a center.
So those cities that have huge warehouses may in fact actually be opposed to this idea?
There may be some cities that are opposed to this idea
Right.
in that circumstance.
Right. Well, I support with both. I support both A and B. So.
I make a motion that we vote yes on both.
I'd second. All right, so we have a motion and a second to accept items 2A and 2B. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so let's jump back to item number 8, and we'll turn this one over to Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. The item before you is for the auditing services agreement extension. Annually, the city of Yucaipa engages with external auditors to perform the general city financial statement audit, as well as the single audit reports. The single audit covers federal grant programs. Recently, the city has contracted with auditing firm Van Lant and Fankenel, or VLF for short. The current term with VLF covers a 3-year base term with 2-year single-year extensions. That 3-year base term has now concluded, and it is, and we are here before you to recommend the first of 1-year extension. The cost for this 1-year extension will be $30,000, $850, which was already included in the adopted budget for fiscal year 21-22. That concludes my report, and I'm available for any questions.
So, any questions?
So I thought we had agreed, or at least there was some discussion about changing the auditing company because of the embezzling that we, the budgets that we approved for 6 years. I thought we had agreed to change that service?
We have 1 more year, I believe, of working on some of the issues that this auditor has been so involved in helping with, the grant-funded projects, the methodologies, the appropriate methodologies for dealing with grant-funded projects. And with the number of grant-funded projects that we have, the auditor has been very helpful in doing those sorts of things. With respect to the user fees that we have been working on, as you know, the last year and a half, the auditor has made some substantive recommendations in that effort that have helped us work through some of the user fees issues that you saw in recent council meetings. So a couple of those things this auditor has been instrumental in helping with. We've switched principals in the audit firm, and our recommendation is to continue with the firm with a different principal going forward. But we absolutely have talked about switching audit firms at the appropriate time. My recommendation at this point is to wait 1 more year until we get through these issues that we are embarking on, or engaged in, I should say. So.
As a follow-up to Mayor Pro Tem's question, I'm assuming, maybe wrongfully, that this should not take more than 1 year to resolve and to finalize all of the issues and programs that this company is working with the city.
That's my belief. Just a reminder that some of the issues that are being resolved are issues that go back 3 and 4 years. And this last audit report that we gave you was essentially a year in arrears, partly because of the time it's taken to work through some of those things. So I guess I don't want to say that that for sure none of those will carry forward this coming year in the audit report, but I believe that we've made an awful lot of progress on those fronts that have been identified. And again, the auditor has been helpful in making recommendations in our operations to help solve. So I think we will have resolved those issues this year, but I don't want to guarantee that there won't be something that carries forward beyond June 30th, essentially, of this current fiscal year.
Yeah, I don't, and I think that at least Mayor Pro Tem Duncan and the rest of the council agrees that we don't want to keep extending it year after year after year. We want to find some resolution to these issues that we're dealing with.
Agreed.
Okay, I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second for item number 8. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so that takes us to possible action on pending legislation. Ray, do you have anything?
I have nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council.
They are in session again, so we are in danger again. Okay, so that takes us to department reports. Item number 10, and I believe this is
Mr. Mayor,
Lieutenant.
I will need to recuse myself on item number 10 because I'm employed with Sheriff's Department.
All right, all right.
Well, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of City Council. Tonight, we are going to provide the staffing study and strategic plan for fiscal year 21-22 and beyond. The following staffing study and strategic plan is comprised of an evaluation, comparison, and analysis of targeted staffing levels based on crime statistics, demographics, population growth, service demands, and sworn personnel per the 1,000 population ratios. Comparisons were made to other Sheriff's Department contract cities in the Valley. Subsequent analysis resulted in the identification of targeted staffing levels and their associated implementation cost. The proposal is a recommendation to add a total of 2 new deputy sheriff positions to the Yucaipa Police Department's law enforcement services contract. In order to mitigate the financial impact to the city, it is recommended these positions be added incrementally over a 1 to 2 year period. This type of phased approach would evenly distribute the associated personnel cost while also providing incremental increases to overall staffing levels. The current deputy to 1,000 population ratio is 0.47, which is just below the 0.50 ratio recommended in the 2013 Yucaipa Police Department Staffing Study and Strategic Plan. The requested positions are needed in order to meet the demands of an ever-growing business development, as well as maintaining an adequate ratio between sworn personnel and city population that facilitates a high level of operational effectiveness and ensures efficient delivery of law enforcement services to the community. The proposed positions will allow the Yucaipa Police Department to establish minimum staffing requirements consistent with other comparable cities, thus enhancing the quality of service to the public, decreasing response times, and increasing availability for proactive patrol, traffic enforcement, as well as providing enhanced safety to deputies in the field. So this is our current staffing level. We currently have 46 full-time positions, 37 of those are sworn safety positions, and 9 are professional staff. In addition to command and support staff, there are a total of 26 deputy sheriff, 3 detective, and 6 sergeant positions approved for fiscal year 21-22. And the red boxes represent the positions that you previously approved that we anticipate landing on our doorstep on September the 25th. The following charts provide comparisons with other Sheriff's Department contract cities in the Valley. Comparisons are based upon 2019 department statistics, the most recent year available when this report was prepared. So obviously tonight our focus is on the city of Yucaipa. Therefore, we've left the other cities labeled A, B, C, and D. But I can tell you that we constantly strive to be the safest city of all of the contract cities. Right now, we are number 2 behind City D, and I'll get into some of their demographics. We like to compare ourselves to City D, not only because we want to become the safest city, but we think the demographics there are very similar to those of Yucaipa's, but I will let you know, although City D is much larger, as we'll get into subsequent charts and graphs, you'll notice that their crime rate is lower, and I'd like to point out that there are several gated communities in City D, and I think that throws off the numbers just a little bit. So as you can see, Yucaipa's estimated population is the 54,844. And personnel assigned to Yucaipa. So currently, again, this is going off of all the 2019 numbers before we had the extra positions added. So that's why it represents 24 deputy sheriff positions instead of the 26 we're currently at now and the 3 detectives. So the population, if I can go back real quick to this graph here, City D's population was about 54% larger than Yucaipa, but as I said in following graphs and charts here, I'll make the comparison. City D staffed 14 more deputy sheriffs and 1 more detective in Yucaipa in 2019. Total calls for service. Although they are much larger, if you look at the calls for service, there were only 304 more calls for service in the entire year in City D than in Yucaipa in 2019. Their priority 1 call for service, those are in-progress calls where there's a likelihood that the perpetrator is still in the immediate area. So the numbers are even getting closer here. The Yucaipa at 7,139 compared to City D of 7,777. City D had 638 more priority 1 calls. Again, they have 14 more deputy sheriffs and 1 more detective to assist with those. Response times. City D responded to priority calls for service on average of 1.25 minutes faster than Yucaipa in 2019. These are the crime index, and again, City D has several gated communities. As you can see, though, with the other comparable cities, we're second behind City D. The crime index rate is specific crimes per 1,000 residents. City D maintains a lower crime index in both Part 1 and Part 2 crimes than Yucaipa, despite a significantly larger population. Next is crime activity. Yucaipa had close to the same amount of reports taken at 185, or excuse me, at 100, but 185 more arrests per deputy than City D in 2019. Calls for service per deputy sheriff. This is where it really starts to separate from City D. Yucaipa, the average, on average, a deputy handled 1,829 calls for service, 666 more calls for service than the average deputy in City D. Here, the arrest numbers are even more staggering. Each Yucaipa deputy averaged 24 more arrests, so 85% more arrests, and 58, so 54% more reports than deputies in City D. So our deputies are extremely busier here in Yucaipa than they are in City D. The per 1,000 ratio that I referenced in the 2013 Yucaipa Police Department study, where we strive to be at 0.45, in 2019, as you can see, Yucaipa is at 0.44 with the additional deputy sheriff positions that you have provided. Got us up now to 0.47, at least effective on September the 25th, but we strive to be at 0.50, which would be the 2 additional deputy sheriff positions that we are requesting. If we apply the approved fiscal year 21-22 deputy staffing level to the 2019 workload statistics, we see the following decreases in the workload. Calls for service handled per deputy would decrease 141 calls for service per deputy, which is about 8%. Then the activity per deputy, arrests made per deputy would decrease by 0.405 arrests from 52.5 about to 48.5, again, 8%. Reports taken by deputy would decrease by 12.82 from 166 to 153. Those numbers, I think, can be a little bit misleading because I think if we had additional deputy sheriffs and additional time on their hands in between calls, I don't know that their number of arrests would necessarily decrease, or if they could be more proactive out looking for additional problems that we can handle. The cost analysis for the positions requested, the 2 deputy sheriffs and 1 vehicle would be just over $457,000. And again, this is why we propose it incrementally over the next 1 or 2 fiscal years. In conclusion, the cities of Yucaipa and City D bear a great number of similarities to each other. Both cities have transformed from small agricultural towns to vibrant cities with strong community identity. While this city is larger than Yucaipa and has a higher population, their crime rate is as low as Yucaipa's. Based on an analysis of the above statistics, it's apparent that deputies assigned to Yucaipa have considerably less time during their shifts to be proactive than deputies assigned to City D. With increased proactive patrol time comes additional opportunities to observe suspicious activities, contact individuals, conduct more traffic stops, which is, of course, one of the keys to improved traffic safety here in the city. The vast majority of residents and business owners we serve would welcome and appreciate increased police visibility and interaction. The Yucaipa Police Department is well aware of the many benefits of spending additional time with others in the community. The partnership between the police department and members of the community is of the utmost importance and mutually beneficial. With additional staffing, the average number of calls for service handled per deputy drastically decreases, allowing time for deputies to engage with members of the community between being assigned to calls. Deputies are able to create and maintain relationships with business owners, their employees, and residents when they're not investigating a crime or handling a call for service. Additionally, with a decreased average number of calls being handled per deputy, more time can be spent conducting proactive enforcement, such as traffic stop, pedestrian checks, and spending time in problematic areas to deter crime. This shows those living or working in the area, the police department is well aware of their issues and willing to spend extra time there instead of simply responding to incident after incident. Changes in law over the last decade have significantly impacted policing statewide by allowing for shorter jail sentences or no time in custody whatsoever. This change results in returning non-law-abiding individuals to communities at a much faster rate than in years past. The COVID-19 pandemic had law enforcement impacts as the California Judicial Council adopted a statewide COVID-19 emergency zero bail schedule. So bail was set at $0 for most people accused but not yet tried of misdemeanor and some lower level felonies. All of these changes have resulted in an environment where even the suspects are identified, when even after the suspects are identified and arrested, they are likely to be released back into the community within hours or days. This often leads to more criminal behavior and more of a workload for deputies. In conclusion, the Yucaipa Police Department requests modest increases to its current number of safety positions. Ensuring public safety, maintaining order, safeguarding lives and property, as well as enhancing the overall safety of the deputies in the field requires these positions be added in a timely manner. These new positions will allow minimum staffing levels that will keep pace with an ongoing service demand of an ever-increasing population, as well as ensure delivery of high-quality, high-performance law enforcement services to those who live in, work in, or visit the city of Yucaipa. Thank you, and I'm available for any questions.
Mr. Mayor, just a couple of things to add, if I may, very quickly. Number one, although it's no guarantee, we've had some conversations with the sheriff and his management team about also adding deputies in the county jurisdictional area that, as you know, is part of our contract and our credits associated with our contract. And the second thing I'd like to note for the record is that this was reviewed by the Public Safety Committee, minus Councilmember Thorpe, and approved for submittal to the full council this evening for your consideration. And perhaps the council may want to consider an alternate member on the Public Safety Committee because of the conflict issues that Councilmember Thorpe has confronted with. So.
Okay, so are there any questions for staff?
Excellent picture. Excellent place to take that picture. That's on California Street, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's a great picture.
Justin, you have something? Oh. Go ahead, either one.
I have a question. So priority one calls, something in progress, an event in progress. So when I look up on my phone, Yucaipa Police Department hit call, it calls the 9 number, 916, whatever it is. Does that go to dispatch and then back to, how does that go down as far as determining the timeline of a call?
Well, it depends. You can certainly call the front desk of the Yucaipa station, and depending on what internet search you do, it could bring you to our front counter if you call after hours, or if the phones are busy at the Yucaipa station, it'll roll over to dispatch, whereas 911 obviously will get you to dispatch every time.
So if they go to dispatch, then they call to the station?
No. So we have a centralized dispatch out of Rialto. So if someone in Yucaipa needs law enforcement services, that call goes to Rialto, and a call taker inputs the information as they're on the headset. Usually if it's an in-progress type call, they'll put in the address and the very basics, and they send it to the person who's actually working the radio. So while the call taker is getting additional information about the emergency in progress, the radio dispatcher is getting a unit or multiple units en route there as more information is coming in. The call taker will then supplement the call with additional information, like if a suspect got into a vehicle and is driving east on a certain street, they can let that know in real time so that, you know, the same person who's talking on the radio is not the same person trying to talk on the phone and enter information. So it's actually a very efficient system.
And that's, radio traffic is also concurrent with MTD information too, isn't that on the screen?
Yes, correct. And obviously, we don't want our deputy sheriffs looking down at their screen while they're driving quickly to a call or while they're driving at all. So any pertinent information, that person working the radio is taking the same information that's sent to the deputy's computer, picking out what might be important, and relaying that to the deputies over the air. So as they're driving, they're hearing the information instead of having to look down and see it.
And my understanding is our park rangers now have a radio that's connected directly to your radio system?
Yeah, that is correct. A council meeting or two ago when I provided our mid-year report, that's one of the great things that we did. Both our park rangers and code enforcement purchased radios, and we conducted training at the Yucaipa Police Department. Not just on radio etiquette, but ran them through scenarios. A whole bunch of training. We actually have an employee at the Yucaipa Police Department who used to be a sheriff's dispatcher, so she did a portion of that. Different deputies did portions of the training. And then it was important to have them in the station and following their training going on ride-along, so the deputies not only understand their voice or know that the park rangers and code enforcement officers have radios, but actually get to put a name with the face and get to know them a little bit. The park rangers and code enforcement officers can see how a deputy sheriff who's been using a radio for years does it, what it sounds like. And so I think that's going to help them down the road should they experience an emergency or need a deputy sheriff. I think it's going to better help them communicate.
Thank you. It's a great report.
So as Mr. Christian Farmer so eloquently put it in our comparison to his previous employer in Claremont, Yucaipa is growing. And with that growth comes a need for infrastructure improvement in all manners of city governance. We wouldn't grow our city to a point where the roads couldn't support it. We wouldn't grow or place a housing development in an area where flood control was an issue. These are the infrastructures we take to safeguard our citizens, our businesses. And I view a growth in law enforcement as nothing more than a infrastructure upgrade to support the growth, make the city of Yucaipa safe as it can be. I think your presentation, Lieutenant, was spot on. You have my full support to get to that 0.50% deputy per 1,000 residents. I think if that is the standard that is set, that is the standard we should try to abide by. Industry standards are set for a reason, and people with substantially more intelligence than I have come up with this number. So you have my support. Great presentation, and just keep up the good work over there, guys.
Thank you, sir.
David, you have anything?
I have nothing to add. Great report, LT.
Thank you, sir.
It was an excellent report. One thing that I got to do a number of years ago, and I'm going to do it again, I'm going to request it from captain or the lieutenant, is a ride-along. I used to go on ride-alongs to really get a sense of what our city's like. So I'm going to request that again, so.
Yeah, we'd be
It's-
very fortunate to have you out there. It's a great experience, and it's also open to members of the community. Right now, that program is still suspended just because of COVID, and now with the variant, we're doing everything that we can to keep the deputy sheriffs in the car safe, and we're not allowing the ride-alongs, but sooner than later, that program's gonna open back up, and there have been several members of the community who I know from 20 years ago when I was a deputy sheriff working in a patrol car, who I knew from the community who maybe didn't quite understand what we did, but had an interest in it, and they would come out and ride, and you get firsthand knowledge of what it's like to be a deputy sheriff and what it looks like from this side of the car, and it's a great opportunity.
So really quick, I know visibility is a really important thing when it comes to policing. People need to see the police. I know our COPs are down from 55, I believe they're all the way down to 18. Does that make a huge impact on visibility and the perception of the city?
It does. And as you know, we're a contract and we fall under the Sheriff's Department umbrella as well, and there have been certain suspensions of programs. Most recently, Friday, we've had to suspend in-person meetings with our Citizens on Patrol and Explorers. Citizens on Patrol in particular, they generally are an older crowd. We get a lot of retirees in there. We don't want to, for the same reason we're not doing ride-alongs, we also don't want to have a bunch of COPs congregate at our station and potentially get sick. But Captain Williams and I have had several discussions, as well as with city staff, about different types of recruiting events. And as soon as we are able to, we have an open house planned at the station. Things that have been done in the past in the city of Yucaipa long before I got here were a citizens academy, if you will, where we can set aside 4 Tuesday or Wednesday nights in a row where interested members of the community can come into the station, see exactly what we do, what their role would be as a Citizens on Patrol member. And years ago, when this was tried, it was very successful. And people who maybe just thought they wanted to come in and see what the police department did and didn't necessarily believe that they had enough time to volunteer and take on another hobby really understood the importance, what a difference maker they could be. And even if we could have them for 12, 16 hours a month, really that's the bare minimum requirement. And it really helped raise those numbers. So we're looking at different ideas like that have worked in Yucaipa, successful Citizen on Patrol programs that are going in other cities. Our department, the Sheriff's Department, has 2,000 sworn people. We have 2,000 professional staff or support folks, but we also have 2,000 volunteers. Out here in Yucaipa, we're very fortunate to have a lot of search and rescue volunteers with a lot of our local terrain. We use them all the time, and we're very fortunate to have them. One thing we could definitely use more of are Citizen on Patrol members and explorers. With the support that we get from this city, the community, there's no excuse why we don't have more, and we have recruiting events planned, but we just have to abide by the COVID regulations set forth by the Sheriff's Department in the immediate, but certainly in the near future, we're going to be having those events, and it's very valuable to have them.
All right.
Are we going to talk about at some point, because there is a budgetary number here, are we going to talk at some point in the future about trying to bring back that half-cent sales tax?
We certainly can. It's up to council to ask us to bring that forward again, and we're happy to do that.
Well, we went ahead and followed the consultant's advice, as you know, about the way we did it. And everyone that I talked to said if we'd have allocated that money specifically for public safety, they'd have been more inclined to vote for it. And I think we're going to have to bring that back at some point, especially with the firefighters, the paramedics, and now with this number here, we're going to need to do that.
All right, so we'll have to look at that at a future date, correct? All right, so thank you very much. Excellent report.
This is just to receive and file?
Review and approve.
I'll make a motion that we review, and we've already reviewed it, and approve it.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second to adopt item number 10. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. All right, so that takes us to item number 11. Just for me?
Yes.
We'll wait till John gets in.
Thank you, and good evening, Mayor and council members. This item is the award of contract for the Street Rehabilitation Program. Council approved the fiscal year 2020-2021 pavement management program in May of 2020, and this year's program in April of this year. That approved pavement management program includes the street rehabilitation programs for both last year and this year. Those programs include the asphalt patching, edge mill and complete street repaving, and also full width milling and complete street repaving. Staff is proposing to combine both of those programs into one contract at this time. By combining the programs and increasing the bid quantities and also the scope of work, staff felt that the city would receive more competitive bids and ultimately reduce costs of repaving city streets. The two programs were advertised for construction bids in July of this year. The map on the screen before you shows the streets that are being proposed as part of the fiscal year 2020-2021 program. The two different colors identify the different types of treatments, where yellow is the edge mill and overlay, the blue is a full width mill and overlay. In both of those treatments, the entire width of the street will be repaved. This next map is the rehabilitation program for the current fiscal year, and again, the two different colors represent the two types of treatments. The list of the streets that are being proposed to be repaved or rehabilitated is included as an attachment to the agenda report. 5 bids were received. The apparent low bidder is Maddich Corporation with a bid in the amount of $2,153,806.19. The engineer's estimate prepared for the work is about $3.6 million. So you'll notice that we did receive favorable bids. Maddich Corporation has successfully completed paving projects for the city in the past, and there is sufficient funding available to complete the 2 programs as shown on the fiscal table on page 230 of the agenda report. Staff is recommending the award of the contract to Maddich Corporation in the amount of $2,153,806.19. Staff is also recommending a contract contingency amount of $538,000 and also $85,000 for contract administration, testing, and inspection that will be required for the contract. And again, due to the favorable bids and the bid prices that were received, staff is recommending the contract contingency amount of about just under 25% of the contract amount. If council approves, staff will work with the contractor to add streets to the list that is included in your agenda report. Those streets that are proposed to be added will come from the list that was approved by council to be completed as part of next fiscal year. So it will allow us to pave or rehabilitate streets ahead of our current 5-year plan. And again, this additional contingency will allow the city to take advantage of those lower unit costs and to repave the city streets and again, ultimately save the city money. It's also important to note that staff has shared this list of streets with the various utility companies. That way they can coordinate their work and we will prevent trench cuts into newly paved streets after we repave the streets. At this time, staff is recommending that City Council approve staff's recommendations as listed in the agenda report for this item. And that concludes my report, and staff is available for questions.
All right, before we go into questions, I do have a public comment, and I will ask Asher Hartel.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I'm in favor of this project with one caveat. And I've talked extensively with Ray Casey about the condition of Avenue H. It's my caveat is, and my problem with the staff report is at the bottom of page 229 and top of page 230, it talks about Avenue H. I reside on Avenue H, have been there for over 30 years. But the staff report says that the segment of Avenue H from 5th Place to the westerly limit is currently identified to be completed in fiscal year 2022, 2023, which is 2 years out per the approved PMP, and could be incorporated into the program with the approval of this contract. And by saying that it could be incorporated, that means maybe it'll be included with this, but then maybe not. And the condition of Avenue H is such that, just to refer to the charts at the back of the staff report, I spent this afternoon driving around, and I visited a dozen of these that are going to be rehabilitated or have various types of fixes. And Avenue H, this stretch of Avenue H that I live on, is far worse than any of these. And I was hoping that maybe council members had an opportunity to visit this stretch of Avenue H. In talking with Ray, I know he's talked to council members about it, and I want to thank Ray for making a reference to Avenue H in this report. And I also want to apologize to Ray because I've been pestering him about Avenue H for a couple of months now, and I've talked to the mayor about it. It's beyond bad. It's in horrible condition. It's coming apart. It's in chunks, which leads me to question the validity of the PMP. How a road in as bad a condition as this is not included for immediate fix and repair is beyond me. I assume that the PMP was prepared by a consultant. Whoever did it, when it comes to Avenue H, somebody was asleep at the wheel. So I'm just hoping that we can get a fix to Avenue H, this stretch of Avenue H.
All right.
Out of this.
Thanks, Asher. Thanks.
Happy to respond to any questions.
Let me talk to staff, and then I'll call you back up if I need you.
Okay,
All right.
thanks.
The way I understand it is that we have because our bids came back with very favorable, that we have a higher contingency rate, perhaps that we could get this area finished in a sooner.
Yes, with council's approval of that contingency amount, Avenue H can be added to the program for this year. And I do want to add that when City Council approved the draft pavement management program in April of this year, when City Council reviewed and approved it, one of the things that was mentioned was that there's different criteria that is taken into consideration when the streets are prioritized, and that is street condition, the pavement of the condition of the pavement, the overall street condition, and then one of those is the volume of traffic on that street. And we have noticed that a lot of the streets that end in a cul-de-sac or aren't through streets that don't have a high volume of traffic, they're not as highly prioritized as other streets, so.
Right. Okay.
I just have one question. 19 cents on that bid? They really turned in a bid that $2 million and 19 cents, really? That's humorous. I'm glad to see California Street in the wash is on that. I know he said that Avenue H was bad. I haven't driven that, but California Street sucks with a passion, for sure.
If you also have an opportunity, and if the Obviously, I agree that Avenue 8 should be prioritized with that contingency. If you have an opportunity, I received an email and a phone call regarding southbound lanes that travel on 15th Street from the Boulevard to Avenue E, which is also in dire need of repair and attention. So should the funding prove available, I ask that you take a look at that as well, please.
There are many streets that need to be rehabbed, and it's tough. You have to make a decision on where you go and how much money you have. If you got $10, you can only spend $10 worth of brick and only so many streets, and I feel for that. But I will say, just make sure I can talk about any of these streets because that top purple dot right there, you go down to the intersection, that's where I live, and that's within 500 feet of my residence. It's okay for me to talk about this and make a decision?
Yes, I believe so,
Okay.
Councilmember Avila. These are just typical maintenance, and you wouldn't be getting any atypical service different from others in the neighborhoods.
Okay, and I just want to say Cavari Street, I drove that the other day, just because I just drive my neighborhood once in a while, and I thought that street was in pretty good condition. When you go down my street, especially in my section, it's not so much. So I was a little surprised that this is actually on the list for rehab. And so, yeah, I don't know.
Well, sometimes streets are being microsurfaced to be able to save the street. And some of them are so far gone that you have to wait, and it has to be a complete total rehab of the street. And it's a completely different cost component.
And if I may, that's an element of the pavement management program that is really hard for people to appreciate, is that, and Asher is right, I've been out there and I've looked at that street and it is shot. But part of the pavement management program intent is to catch the street section before it gets to the next level of need. So you do a slurry before it needs a microsurface. You do a microsurface just before it needs a pavement overlay. You do a pavement overlay just before it needs a full mill and pave. And so streets that are that far gone sometimes stay on that P&P for a couple of years. It doesn't make as much sense, but they're already at a point that they have to be completely ground and paved. And so that's part of it that's a little bit hard for folks to get, but that one definitely needs to be done. There's a few others that folks have brought to our attention that really need to be done. And I want to give Fermin credit. When I first got here many, many years ago, all we did was slurry seal on residential streets. That's all, I'll just say that's all I was allowed to do. How's that? And with Fermin's leadership, we've started to do more and more street paving on residential streets and even pulverize or grinding and pave on residential streets. The downside, of course, is you don't cover as much ground that way, because it's more costly per square foot. But we just don't have a lot of residential streets anymore that, other than in Chapman Heights perhaps, more recent subdivisions, where slurry seal makes a lot of sense. We've got to do microsurface and then overlay, and we just can't cover as much ground. But we've done a lot more on residential streets in the form of paving and grinding and paving in the last 10 years than certainly before that.
Mr. Mayor, if I can
Yes.
comment on the comment regarding Cavari Court. As part of the 2018 analysis, it was noted that the final cap on Cavari Court was never completed. And we had it on the list earlier, but we were informed that there's a home that was recently built on that street that cut into the street for utilities. So we were waiting for them to complete their utilities and then come back and complete the final cap, so that street, when it was developed many years ago, it never received the full thickness of paving. So that's the reason why it was prioritized.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay. All right, with that, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so that takes us to item number 12, which is Make a Difference Day. I believe it's Megan.
This is a team agenda item, so I'll be starting off, and Fermin will be
ending the agenda. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I think we can all agree that Yucaipa is a really special place. And one of the things that makes Yucaipa so special is our residents and how much they give back to this community. One of the ways that they give back is by participating in Make a Difference Day. In 2007, the city began participating in Make a Difference Day, which was a national holiday held on the fourth Saturday of every month, that would be intense, no, of October. And it started by meeting with a committee which had representatives from different service groups and nonprofits in the city. And together they came up with different projects and ways to improve the city. The city has partnered with different agencies and community groups and churches to complete projects such as planting trees, shrubs and flowers, weed and litter removal, broadcasting native wildflower seeds in open spaces, painting of walls, fences, and public facilities, even construction of gazebos and a dog park. This year's Make a Difference Day is scheduled for Saturday, October 23rd, and possibly Saturday, October 30th, due to the size of the project proposed for this year. In 2017, 18, and 19, city staff sponsored a tree planting project at 5 Winds El Dorado Ranch Park. Since those projects were so well received by the community and well attended, another tree planting project is being proposed at El Dorado Ranch Park. I forgot to mention that one of the best parts of Make a Difference Day is at the end of all your hard work, you get a fresh hot dog that is cooked by the Liens Club. And the funding for that hot dog comes from the Tip a Hero event, which is held yearly. And it's where our local firefighters and police officers go to Jose's and provide the server duties. And all tips go back to Make a Difference Day for that delicious lunch. Last week, the Make a Difference Day committee met and was in favor of one large project this year at 5 Winds El Dorado Ranch Park. The committee has began seeking volunteers, including reaching out to the elementary schools. I would now like to turn it over to Fermin.
Thank you, Megan. The September 2020 El Dorado fire burned approximately 300 acres of the El Dorado 5 Winds Ranch property. And since then, that public facility has been closed. And since that fire, staff and also community volunteers have completed several cleanup and repair efforts that included cleaning up and repairing some of the multi-use trails and also picking up a lot of the debris that was uncovered by the fire. Staff and the city's contractors have also completed some post-fire mitigation work in the area to reduce the potential risk of flooding and debris flows, not just in El Dorado, but also in the overall burn scar area. The restoration work and the grading work that you've seen completed at El Dorado over the last 10, 11 months is consistent with the approved concept plan, the plan that was approved by City Council in 2019. And in an effort to continue that restoration effort at El Dorado Park and to reopen it to the public, staff is proposing another Make a Difference Day project at this facility. The plan on the screen is a concept plan that was reviewed and approved by City Council, as I mentioned, in 2019. And just to go over some of the proposed amenities included in the plan, this is Oakland Road along the south side. The restroom and parking lot that have been constructed is on the east side or on the right side of the map here. Proposed as part of the concept plan is an archery course just north of the parking lot. Some camping, group camping and equestrian camping areas in this area, a horse corral, and also an outdoor amphitheater. And as you can see, many multi-use trails along the entire property. This is where the current Adobe and Five Winds Ranch House is. As part of the plan, some remodeling or retrofitting of the structures is being proposed, and also a pond to the west. Previous Make a Difference Day projects included planting of trees along Oakland Road, along the south side of the property, and also trees along the west edge of the property. For this year's project, staff is proposing to plant over 400 trees and shrubs at the facility, and also broadcast native wildflower mixes in certain areas to help with the restoration of the park. And those native wildflower mixes would be consistent with the plan that has been prepared for the mitigation efforts at this facility. Staff is also reaching out to contractors and other community members to potentially donate material and labor to install some horse corrals or other amenities along the east side of the park. This next exhibit shows some of the proposed tree and shrub locations. Again, this is the parking lot and the restroom at El Dorado. And what you see in this green color here along the north and close to the restroom is the location for the proposed trees and shrubs. These trees that you see here along Oakland Road were part of the trees that were planted as part of a previous Make a Difference Day project. And as Megan mentioned, due to the size and the scope of the proposed project, the event is proposed to be held over 2 days. If approved, staff will need to prepare for the event in advance by purchasing the trees and shrubs that are proposed to be planted, purchasing the materials and some of the irrigation equipment, and also coordinate for the installation of that irrigation equipment prior to the event. The total estimated cost of the project is $144,000. The current balance in the El Dorado Ranch project budget is $79,100. So for the balance of the funding, staff is recommending that council amend the fiscal year 21-22 capital improvement program by transferring $25,900 from the Parks Capital Replacement Fund to the El Dorado Ranch project budget, and also transferring $39,000 from the general fund unassigned fund balance to this project. Staff is also recommending council find that the public interest will not be best served and would be uneconomical by a formal proposal process, waive the formal solicitation of proposals, and also authorize the city manager to execute the purchase orders that are required for the purchase of those materials and trees and shrubs for the project up to the amount of $62,000. And the contract for the installation of the irrigation system, that contract will be obtained through the normal formal bid process for public works projects. That concludes our report, and staff is available for questions you may have.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, before you ask questions, number one, just wanted to, for the record, mention that we have received some donations already from certain businesses in the community, including Dutch Brothers for trees. And I also want to point out that there's a lot to do here, ultimately to open the entire facility. But we believe that with the Make a Difference Day projects that staff has outlined for you, we can get that easterly element open with the equestrian area and the group camping area. Obviously, we're still gonna have work to do on the Adobe Ranch and the pond to the west, but we feel that we can open up safely the equestrian group camping area, equestrian camping area, and the regular group camping area. There are some other improvements that have to be done between now and opening, after the Make a Difference Day improvements are done. But we like the relocation of the barn as a rec area, but we have plans to do that over the next several months, probably after the Make a Difference Day. So with those things in mind, we think we can get the park, portions of the park open in the spring. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so are there any questions for staff?
Have we seen this layout here before? Have we seen this like this before?
Yes, you've approved this before. Not the second exhibit, which is basically the landscaping and irrigation. This is a new exhibit to show you what we're doing with Make a Difference Day, if approved. But that first exhibit was a result of the committee, a series of committee meetings that several council members participated in, as well as committee and commission members from the community, from your committees and commissions, culminating in approval by city council of that concept plan. And then updated recently, I'm sorry, I got a little close to the speaker there, the mic there, updated recently with the vineyard in the front.
All right, so any questions for staff?
Are these trees that are being planted mature trees? Are they seedlings or?
We're proposing 15-gallon trees, so they're pretty big trees.
Any other questions? If not, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so that takes us to item number 13, a vote on the petition for disestablishment of Uptown.
All right, thank you, Alabama Mayor and City Council members. As you may recall, at the last City Council meeting, City Council did authorize staff to proceed with distribution of the petition for disbanding the P-bids in the Uptown. The City of Yucaipa does own several properties within the P-bid boundaries, and so this item is to authorize the city manager to complete the petition on behalf of the city for those city-owned properties. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer questions.
All right, before we ask questions, I do have a speaker. You want to hear? Would you like to hear him first? John Chu.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the council, member of the council. My name is John Chu. I am a board member of the Uptown Yucaipa Association. Right now, I live at 35073 Gemwood Lane in Yucaipa. I know that the city has sent out a petition about a week and a half ago, but as of today, I have not received that petition. Number one, I'd like to ask the staff and see how many property owner has returned with the petition. And secondly, in the past several months, we have a difficult time to recruit the new members, which have about 2 or 3 vacancies. And then we found out that we're very difficult to find the people interested in joining the association. I think I'm in favor of that establishment of the association and the PBIT due to that what is situation right now. I don't think we can continue operate with the people interested with the association.
All right, thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right, so do you have any questions?
No, I was going to move approval.
Oh. Anybody have any questions, comments, motions?
I'll move approval.
All right.
Our speaker didn't receive, is that what he said? Has not received. I thought I read in here somewhere that we actually went door to door and.
No, so the survey regarding kind of the Uptown activities was provided door to door. We did send out the P-bid petition via certified mail to all the registered property owners, since some of the business owners aren't the same as the property owners. I haven't received any incomplete returns from the post office, but certainly anyone that was interested, John, I can reach out to you and provide a copy of the petition. As long as we get one for the property address and the owner, then we count it. It doesn't matter if it was through the certified mail or not. As long as it ties with whoever the registered owner is, that's what we're tallying up.
Okay. We good?
I'm good.
Okay. Did you make a motion?
I made a motion to approve.
All right.
I'll second if Councilmember Beaver doesn't.
Nope, it's all you.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
And just clarify, this is to authorize the city manager to vote in favor of the petition for disestablishment.
Correct.
On behalf of the city properties.
on behalf of the city properties.
Good with that? All right, so all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. So that takes us to a public hearing, the establishment of liens. So at this point, I will open the public hearing and we'll turn it over to staff for presentation.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Tonight is in regards to the outstanding code enforcement citations that have been issued as a result of code enforcement actions, but where those fines have not been paid. The list is collected every year for council review, and then ultimately these outstanding amounts are then forwarded to the county as a lien to be recorded on the subject properties. Should be noted that pursuant to the April 2019 policy that was approved by City Council, the total amount listed on the lien is just the administrative costs for those code cases rather than the totality of the fine amounts. And then the list itself shows the total fines that are levied, and then it also shows admin costs that was calculated for council reference. So it shows the total number of citations that were issued during that that calendar year or the fiscal year. And then next to it is what the admin cost is as a result. Should be noted that as part of the fines that are issued as part of the administrative citation process, they're added in a $100 fine for the first one, $200, and then $500 amounts, and then assessed at a typical time interval. And then gaps may be provided where efforts are made to help get compliance on those properties. And then as part of that, so it's more of a consistent amount as they do not respond to the code case, those fines add up. And then the admin costs may instead vary quite a bit based on the scope of the case and efforts to inspect other properties to help achieve compliance. We did receive 2 letters that were received prior to the meeting, or as part of prior to the issuance of the packet, and so those have been provided for council's reference as well as some site photos of the subject violated locations. And then as part of it, typically in past years before the current policy, many residents would come here asking for a reduction of the fines to admin costs, and this has already been reflected as part of the list. I do want to note as well for the record that prior to the meeting, a total of 12 properties have paid the outstanding fines, and so they would be removed from the list. And then 2 were also removed due to efforts with the property owner and code enforcement staff to achieve compliance. And they were small, I think the $100 fines, and so that was worked through with that. And then also additionally, staff is also seeking some direction regarding the administrative fine policy. As part of the process, as council may know, the lien list itself is just a reduction of the fines to staff costs, but the remaining fine amount isn't necessarily collected as part of this. And then so as part of some of these properties that do receive the relief in terms of the lien amount, there's no distinction between those that have the legitimate hardships that warrant the reduction of fees and those are the habitual violators that do end up accruing quite a bit of fines as part of that. And so in terms of the deterrent process that was a part of for the purpose of the admin fine process is no longer there. And then secondly, a solution to this that other cities have employed is using a collections agency to help facilitate that process and then remove staff completely from the monetary side of things and really just work on compliance efforts. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I can also read off the list of those properties that have paid to date as well for the record.
I do have 2 speaker slips. I'd like to perhaps maybe we hear from them first, and then we'll move forward. Is that okay?
Yep.
All right. Douglas Streakwerda? Sorry, I know I butchered that, sorry. So Douglas, if you could tell us where you live first so we can look up your your property.
Yes, I live at 35442 Acacia Avenue and have been a resident there for 20 years.
Do we know what page number that is?
Are we going to time this?
Yeah, that's okay. Do we know what page number that is, guys?
Repeat your address again?
35442 Acacia Avenue.
Is that page 267? Yeah, page 267 at the bottom.
It may take Ben a moment, that my annotate's not working on
Okay.
the iPad, sorry. Technical difficulty.
Did you say 257?
267, bottom of the page.
267.
That is correct.
Well, normally what's customary is we let our staff explain the scenario, and then we let you go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, sure.
And then, no, you can stay right there, but then you can follow up with what you have to say.
Okay. Yeah, so this subject case itself started in January 1st, or started in 2020 in regards to expired building permits, trash and debris. It was for a new structure or addition to a house that was being built, as well as a minor variance that was being done. As part of the overall efforts, the unpermitted construction, a permit plans had been initially submitted, but then never pulled, and the outstanding permit fees were also never provided as well. So this did bring it back into code enforcement. And then since then, additional monetary fines have been issued to help hopefully get the project moved into the permit stage and be able to pull the permits. There is some unique elements of construction that's proposed in terms of the architecture as well on this subject property. And so the applicant was working on, I think, some of those design elements as well.
Okay. So would you like to explain your case?
Yeah, I didn't quite understand the lack of a permit. I did obtain a permit in 2015 and renewed that permit in 2017, and had been working with that permit active with Michael Moore as my inspector through the entirety of that project. Upon Michael Moore's retirement, a new inspector was issued to me right before Michael retired, which was in January when the first notice of violation came about. There was I guess a thought by planning or code enforcement that there wasn't a permit, but Michael did inspect my house for that particular time and told me that there was a possible issue with the city, but to let them know that I did have a permit, that he had checked it out, and that I had passed that portion of my inspection. I then came back into the city because I received another notice of violation later in January. And I spoke with, I believe, Kelly Witt, as a matter of fact, and she was a little concerned about some of the construction materials that were in the front yard. I took care of those construction materials and organized very well the backyard, so there were no issues there. And then didn't hear anything else again until September of this year. During that initial conversation with Kelly Witt, I was told by her that I was not going to be allowed to build unendingly, and that I was to stop playing games, and that she was going to send David Fredborg out to my property and close my permit down, and that's exactly what happened.
All right, so we're not here, I just want to let you know, we're not here to castigate you and tell you that.
Certainly.
What we're here trying to do is the city has different codes and different
Gotcha.
regulations.
I absolutely understand
and
that.
all what we're trying to do is just make sure everyone follows the code and so forth. So in the end, what we're looking for you to do is just to comply with, if you got to get certain permits, if you have to clean up for code enforcement.
Certainly.
And usually we're I don't want to talk about my other council member. We're usually pretty cool about giving you guys some time to get it cleaned up and get it all straightened up. So,
Well, I have been cleaned up since January. I only started receiving the notice of violations back in September once my permit was canceled or expired. At that point, I started receiving fines for not having a permit, and I've worked continuously with the city to renew my permit and to get all that they need supplied. It now needs engineering, which is a considerable cost, and then now this lien potential.
Okay. Well, if you would like, you could sit down for right now really quick, and we're going to go ahead and discuss your case and see what we can do.
Thank you.
So to get into compliance, what does Douglas need to do?
So it is submitting of the plans for building safety. I do want to note, just trying to quickly, in terms of the permits that he had been issued in the site plan for that project, and then what ended up being built kind of since then did not match up, and so that's, I think, what instigated some of the building and safety concerns, is that the reconciliation of those different elements and some different structural elements that were built without necessarily the calculations to help validate that. So in terms of moving forward for that particular case is to get those revised plans in to make sure that there's the structural calculations for those different pieces of construction, and then ultimately pulling the permit and completing the addition that's proposed on the subject property.
Okay. No, I know it's a little bit difficult right now to find someone to do calcs and all that. So perhaps we could give out a certain time frame for him to get it done, and then we can perhaps reduce this down to just staff cost, if everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, I'm good.
Bob, you all right?
I'm okay with that. What's staff cost on this? Is that's that number 1391? Is that what that is, or?
Yes. 1391.30.
That is correct.
But what kind of time frame do we want to give them to get everything in order?
What kind of staff, or what kind of time does he need?
What kind of time would 90 days work for you?
No.
Well, you're gonna have to work with us, though.
Maybe we can invite him up.
What's that?
Maybe we can invite him up so he can speak into the
Yeah,
microphone.
come,
I
sorry,
can
come
barely
up,
hear
come
him.
back up.
I'm so sorry.
So I did actually require engineering, and I submitted those plans in February. They were redlined and not accepted. And at that point, I needed to then secure another engineer. I've redone some drawings so that I can do that. And it's incredibly difficult to have engineering done right now.
So what kind of time frame are we looking at? We just want to make sure that your property gets up to code and you do.
Excellent, as I do too.
So what kind of time frame do you need?
I would like to have 6 months to get that paid for and my permit reinstated so that I can get back to work on my own property. I am the owner builder. I build all the stuff. It's not
Well,
subbed out.
I don't think its permit is going to be reinstated. I think you're just going to have to pull another permit. So.
I am, and
Okay.
Ron has actually told me he would waive those fees. He would just have a reinstatement fee. They're working with me on the fees,
Okay.
but there's a process to getting that done. The $1,000 doesn't help me in that process. They want one thing done with engineering, and then they're charging me for not having a permit.
Well, what do you guys think of the time frame?
I'm going to defer to someone such as you who knows more about the engineering and the requirements to get this stuff done. Because as you said, it's hard to get.
It is difficult. It's a difficult time to get people to operate. So I say we go with whatever we have here for staff time, and you said 6 months, and you can be done.
I can have the engineering paid for and my new plan submitted and hopefully approved by that point, yes. And then get back to my project.
All right, you will do it, though.
Oh, of course.
That's what we're trying to get you to do. We just want-
I've never stopped in
Okay.
the years I've started.
All right. You guys okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
Sounds like you have consensus here, so.
Okay, thank
You
you.
have 6 months.
I appreciate the time. Is there something that can be done about the staff fees for the lack of permit, which has been terminated by the city?
Our admin cost at this point is at $13.91.
Exactly.
Yeah,
What we're going to do is stop the bleeding, so it won't go beyond 1391 for the next 6 months, no matter what happens. But it looks like, unless you come back again, that this is what it's costing staff to deal with your project. So that's all. We're not penalizing you. We're just asking you to pay for staff time.
I fully understand that. The staff time is to come out and tell me that I don't have a permit, which I already know, and I'm trying to rectify. That's why my notice of violations keep coming, because I don't have a permit.
well, let's do this. We're going to stop the bleeding of $13.91. You come back in 6 months, and we'll see how everything has turned out, and then maybe we can
That'd be
You guys
great.
okay with that?
I appreciate that.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Okay, Julio Sanchez.
Mr. Mayor.
Julio, can you
Julio
speak into
Sanchez.
there you go.
I'm Julio Sanchez, and I live on 1231 15th Street, Yucaipa.
Well, I'm sorry. one-
Requesting an extension for not being able to acquire money to hire or to obtain a permit from the Building and Safety Division.
All right, hold, 1 second, Julio. What address are we looking at?
It's on the same, it's page 267, Julio Sanchez. 15th
Oh, okay,
Street.
I see it.
Just go up 2.
Right. I apologize. Go ahead.
Oh, so thank you for your consideration regarding this matter.
All right, Ben. Go ahead, Ben.
The status with this one, I think, is just no progress has been indicated for that. This was, I believe, the item that was included in the council packet as well, or pictures of the subject site conditions. Let me pull this up. Yeah, so in the staff report, it does show the site conditions of the property in terms of the overgrown vegetation and the current status, as well as the initial complaint status. And so his letter is submitted under page 275 of the agenda report, and then the subsequent pages do show photos from 2018 when this case kind of started, as well as photos of the site under kind of today's conditions as well.
So it looks to me that it's nothing to do with a permit. It has to do with just code enforcement, cleaning.
That is correct. There is a reference for unpermitted construction and inhabited rear structure as well.
Now, Ben, is it the property in the center of the page, or is it the one to the south of the page? On page, let me see, on page 278.
Is the citation for the junk or for the stuff? Is that what that's for?
I think that's what he said.
It's the one in the center.
Center.
Okay, let's clarify this. This is the citation not for a building permit, but for having debris and it's unmaintained property. Is that correct? Because his letter asks for relief from a building permit, if I'm not mistaken. Requesting an extension for not being able to acquire the money to obtain a permit from the Building and Safety Division. I'm not sure what that means, but.
My apologies, there is unpermitted construction as well.
There's unpermitted.
Yeah.
Do you know what it is? Is it a
So
carport or something of that nature?
Inhabited rear structure.
Inhabited rear structure. Do you have someone living in the back of your property?
No. They stopped me for renting, and they make me to remove the gas line, so not to use the kitchen. So it's not living area right now.
And then there's excessive junk, is that what you said, Ben?
Ben, did you say it was the lower one on this photograph or the center one?
It should be the center one.
It's the center one.
So it's a.
So I have a question for you. Does the ADU, I'm not gonna give you a break when it comes to junk. I think if you're in violation for debris on your property, you need to clean it up.
Or it's not on junk.
If that's one of the issues that we have,
I need that. I pay somebody already to do the blueprints.
okay, I think I'm not quite understanding what the issue is.
Because I built without permit.
You built without a permit.
Yeah.
And does this fall under the category of an ADU?
I'm not sure on the size of the structure, but that's certainly something that we can explore with the property owner in regards to the size of the unit and and a solution for permitting of that. Certainly, the ADU permit process is a much more streamlined approach for permitting a second dwelling unit, and so that may be an avenue that may be feasible for the subject property owner.
And I'm all for that, but if there are other violations that it seems to me maybe there is excessive debris that needs to be cleaned up first.
Are we dealing with a code violation as far as code enforcement, as far as debris, or are we dealing with an expired permit?
The focus is on the building permit not being pulled on the property.
All right, so any suggestions, guys?
Well, he's asking for an extension to get a building permit. How long? How long?
3 months?
2 months?
3?
3 months? Okay, so what we'll do is at this point, the way we do this for everyone is our staff has spent a lot of time following up with your issue, and that cost is at $17.94. So we're gonna leave it at $17.94, but we need you to comply with the building codes. And I think there is a simpler way of doing this, and if there's any other violations, you need to take care of that also. You guys okay?
So 3 months.
And 3
90
months?
days.
90 days?
Yes, 90 days.
Okay. Is that okay, guys?
Okay, and the fines, which is 1794.63.
Well, the fines we would waive, but the staff time is at $17.94.
Right. So
I agree with that.
Okay, so we keep the 1794.63 as staff time costs that we want to reimburse, get reimbursed.
So we're holding you right now to what our staff costs, what it costs the city to deal with your property. But we need you to comply with the building code, and you have 3 months to do so.
Okay,
Are you okay with that?
yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Is that okay? Is everything good? All right, thank you, Julio.
All right.
That's
next
it.
one.
That's all I have. Oh, I have one more.
Thank you, that's all, sir. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Julio. Gals? I guess this is 33033 Avenue D?
Yes, it is.
Okay, let's look this one up really quick.
Avenue D. Page are we on? 259?
Tina Gals?
It's my sister,
Okay.
still a family.
All right, Ben, you,
Okay, so this is actually two different code case issues. One was for trash and debris. This particular element of the code case has been resolved. However, the outstanding fines still remain and so haven't been paid, hence why it's part of tonight's agenda. And then the other one is in regards to unpermitted construction, the remodeling of the rear of the house and some roofing and other elements. And so that one is still an active part of the code case.
all right. So you see how we operate. We're, as long as you get it done, we can waive the fines and then just
Well, I've been trying
get
to
you
do
for
that.
staff
and Every
costs.
time I turn around, I get a letter back on my gate. You see me come in here at 6 o'clock, that's what time I come home every day. I can either be working in Baldwin Park, I could be working out the Loma. So there's different things that go on. There was a leak on this roof about 9 years ago. I started working on it then. I found 9 layers of roofing on this back part of the house. I had no clue there was that many layers on there. Pictures were submitted to the city, they seen them. Mike Moore came out and he's seen what was going on. Now they're asking me to draw them a set of plans. Everything's been there since I've been in this property. So how can I turn around and turn in plans for something that was there? That patio cover, the room addition in the back was built in 1979, when this city was a town.
Okay.
All I'm doing is trying to fix the problem. There's no problem no more. There's no more leak. But there was a major leak going on. Rotted plywood that was going on, and you know what? Somebody,
So is this, Ben, time?
it's in the
One
living
second.
area.
What was your name again?
Richard,
Richard. Ben, was this, so this is a patio awning that's been converted into a,
no,
living
it's
space?
there's a room addition behind the garage that was permitted back in '79 when the curb and gutter in front of that house was put there. I talked to the people who did all the work on this house and what they had to do to get that room behind the garage. There's a patio cover between the house and the back half, and it's all covered. There's a slab there. It's all been there since 1979. All I'm doing is fixing the problem. I had some termites, got rid of the termite problem. They had regular Douglas fir. There's pressure treated wood there now.
okay.
So everything is up to code to what it's supposed to be. Right now on the roof, somebody stopped me back in 2020, said, you can't do anything more. So that's when Mike Moore came out before he retired, and he looked at everything, he says, looks like everything's fine. Maybe you should just get a roof on top of it. I tried to, Mike, I don't have the money.
Okay, so.
But it's to a paper stage right now, protected.
Ben,
No
was
more
this,
leak.
okay, Richard, thank you. Was this originally, was this an original complaint due to debris on the property that ended up as a building code violation?
I don't recall the status. I do want to note, just quickly for the record as well, that this was property that was placed on the lien list last year as well for building to be completed within 60 days, or building permit to be complete within 60 days, and then administrative costs to be paid in 4 monthly payments. At that last lien hearing a year ago. I don't know the status of when this code case originated. It does look like it's been around for a little while.
That's about 4 years.
Is this something that if Richard is correct on the, if he believes that it has been permitted, is it something that we can look at the county records and see if it is?
Yeah, as part of the building permit process, if there is historical records from the county building permit or the county assessor, we take that into consideration to legitimize that addition to make sure that we're looking at it from the lens of if it is a remodel or just replacing, bad wood or whatever that case may be, is under that lens versus an expansion of the residence. But in either case, if there's any sort of, dismantling of walls or re-roofing of structures, then that still does require a building permit in either case. But
Were the liens cleared last year? You said it was on there last year. Was that all taken care of last year?
No, because of COVID. All this stuff is going on through COVID stuff the last year and a half. And back when Mike Moore came out, that's when was the last thing that I was able to do anything, and I was gonna try to work around and make some money.
We're only showing 3 dates on here, 500, 500, 500. But if it goes back a year, then that would be a great deal more than that, wouldn't it?
that would have been part of the lien list that was issued last year. So it was never completed per, I guess, council's approval of the lien list last year. And so in terms of the staff costs, it's just related to this year. Whatever was last year is placed on lien on the property in terms of that action.
I'm still confused over how this thing got started.
It's a mess, and they asked me to submit some plans. I submitted plans in October. I got no response till May. May is when I went into the building department, talked to Kelly on it, and also found out that, oh, we can't find your plans that you turned in. Oh, mysteriously, they found them, and then there was corrections to be done.
All right, all
We
right.
want numbers.
Thanks, Richard. So what we're gonna do is, like I said, I've been up here a while, we've been going through this, we're usually pretty cool about making,
I
because
understand
what we want you to do is to just to get up to code.
Let me put a roof on it, and I can be
Well,
done.
let me finish. We want you to get up to code. That's our end goal. Our end goal is not to make your life miserable, although it probably seems that way.
It seems like.
It's okay, it's okay, it's all right. But we just want you to get in up to date. So I am willing to give you an extension. We will stop where we're at right here on our fines, and we'll just give you a date. I don't know, how much time would you guys like to give?
What do you want me to turn in? Last set of plans I turned in, people wanted measurements. They wanted everything, picture roof. How many square feet of shingle am I gonna be putting back on the house? Because I had to take off old roofing. 9 layers of crap that was on the roof, 3,800 pounds.
Well, you're gonna have to talk to the building department and ask what their requirements are, and they'll work with you.
Well, I got the piece of paper that they said they
All
would
right,
measure.
okay.
So I understand what you're saying, and I understand what
We're
they're
trying to work with you, and we just wanna make sure that
wanna
this
work
gets
with- I've
issued.
been here 32 years from San
Gotcha.
Diego.
All right, well, we're gonna go ahead and discuss it with our council at this point, so.
Thank
What
you
do
for
you
your
guys,
time.
what would you guys like to do? Any thoughts?
90 days?
90 days?
Sure, we can do that, yeah.
90 days?
Yeah.
You guys okay with
I
90
mean,
days?
that gets him going, and that gives him some leeway too. Sounds like he's gonna have to do some negotiation and
Okay.
get some things straightened out. 'cause
Have we
it
not
sounds very
already checked with
confusing.
county rules to see if it's, was previously permitted and everything in the 70s, like you said?
Can you repeat that?
You had mentioned that part of the process is checking with the county and historical documents to see if it was in fact permitted and everything was in the 70s. Have we not done that yet?
Normally when it comes to pulling those permits, because we're not the property owner, the property owner itself has to go to the county and request that information. And so in terms of that, if it is purely, I mean, even a room addition or adding that information on isn't necessarily a huge project that probably requires a lot of effort. It's more the reconstruction elements, making sure that those elements get permitted correctly. Certainly the footprint expansion may have some implications, but usually nothing too crazy, not quite like building a second house that has a little bit more involved in terms of the review.
So bottom line is that that's something that the homeowner or resident or contractor has to verify that the permit back in 1979, for example, was pulled and approved. It's not on the city to find that out.
We do try to assist property owners to the extent that we can, but you normally, when it comes to some of those
So you
record
can't,
stuff,
so bottom line is that you can help, but it's still the responsibility of the homeowner, contractor, or builder, whatever it is, to make sure that, to prove that it's been permitted.
that is correct.
Okay, so
All right.
that's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, David.
No, so I think 90 days is okay. And that gives you, Mr. Galvez, an opportunity to go to the county building and to secure a copy of the permit that was originally issued. So that clears you of the original, so we can't say that it's unpermitted. You can prove that. And then you have to work with the city, with the codes and requirements that you need to provide them so you can get your project on the way. If they want measurements and how many shingles, scores of shingles, that's what you have to do. I mean, that's what happened, what I had to do. Our contractor had to provide the permit to the city. So it's just routine. It's nothing special. It's not picking on you or anything. It's just what everybody has to comply with.
All right, so let's.
Yeah.
All right, so I think I'm finished with, I don't have any more speaker slips. So at this point, we do need a motion for items 1 and 2.
I'll make a motion to approve the establishment of the lien list, items 1 and 2 on this item.
Is there a third item, Jennifer?
No, just the decisions on the 3 properties that you made
Oh,
tonight
yeah.
will encompass it as part of your motion.
Right. So does your motion also have the 3 decisions we made?
Including the 3 exceptions that we made here tonight.
And just for the record, that's defer those liens, the first one 6 months, the second one 3 months, and the third one 3 months.
Correct.
Is there a way, it seems almost backwards the way we do this, where if you are delinquent and you're on the risk of having a lien placed, then we will consider waiving, when in fact the people who follow the law get issued a fine, they're paying substantially more in some cases than those who are delinquent and drag their feet. Is there some way we can, that seems odd to me.
Yeah, that's the second
That was the- yeah, the
item on
second
the
part of the question.
agenda, yeah.
Did I miss it?
That was maybe that's something we need to bring back on a separate date,
Actually
not,
didn't
not
even talk
necessarily
about that.
discuss it right now.
Certainly council prerogative, you can ask us to bring that back for consideration.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. You guys okay with that? All right. Yeah, so we'll bring that back. All right, so we do have a motion for 1 and 2 and the 3 exceptions.
I'll second motion.
All right.
Mr. Mayor, I think if I understood that dialogue, I think the motion would really just be for
number
item
one.
number 1, and then number 2 would be brought back for further council consideration.
Oh, you're right. You're correct. Yes.
If the motion could just be amended to make it clear that it's item
So
number 1.
the motion would be for the item number 1 on this item, including the 3 exceptions?
Exactly.
Okay, that would be my motion.
And my second as well.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, so that takes us to a study session. And I believe this is PlaceWorks.
I don't know why I'm just.
Are you looking for the expedited version? I just asking. I thought it was just a question. I thought maybe it was in the menu.
All right, now we get started. All right, thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. We are excited to be here tonight to talk about the draft housing element. We've been working since a number of different study sessions that we've had with City Council and also with other committees, commissions, and members of the public discussing our approach to the housing element for the next housing cycle. And so Mark Hoffman is here to give kind of a big overview on the different elements, and I will provide feedback as well on the different sections.
All right, thank you very much, Ben. For this study session, we had 3 primary objectives. One is to provide an overview of the process for how the housing element was prepared. Secondly, is we wanted to talk more about the strategies that are being adopted or that are being considered for adoption for addressing the RHNA. And then finally, to provide an overview of the housing plan and the program commitments that are actually in that plan. And if this is a document which you feel is ready to go, our hope would be to submit it to HCD, Department of Housing and Community Development, for the review following this public hearing, and incorporating any changes that you would like to see prior to submission to HCD. Next. Before I begin, though, I wanted to provide a very brief overview of the housing element. I'm sure this is not new news for you. It would be more for the benefit for the audience and those who are not familiar with the housing element. First, as we all know, state law requires all cities in California to have a general plan and a housing element that complies with state law. And your general plan was adopted in 2016. Your housing element was actually last adopted in 2014. This will be an update of that. In the briefest terms, the housing element is required to address the full range of housing needs in your community, of all income levels and of all household types. And a fundamental part of the housing element is to address the housing element's production needs, the production of housing. And so the proposed housing element that you see today covers the planning period of 2021 through 2029, and it will replace your existing housing element when adopted. Next, please. So in terms of legislative context, I remember us talking, it must have been about a year or so ago, at least a year ago, when we spoke about all the new legislation that's come down from the state. More new bills have been passed in probably the last 3 years than I've seen in probably the last 20 years. So it really is a different context, and that context really affects how we prepare the housing element. 4 things I wanted to note, 4 bills. AB 1397, a lot of text, but simply what it does, it raises the bar for cities when they try to show that their housing meets the housing need of the city. Lots of new regulations that we have to take into account. 2 bills, SB 166 and SB 330. What SB 166 means is that you have to have enough sites available for housing at all times for your RHNA. In addition, SB 330 prohibits the city from downzoning areas of the city unless other areas are upzoned. That has some implications for land use. The third major bill is AB 686, and what that does is require the housing element to have a fairly detailed fair housing section, which you'll see as part of Chapter 3. That requirement was typically reserved in the past for cities that received funds directly from the federal government, essentially what they call entitlement jurisdictions. Now it applies to all cities. And finally, AB 72 and a few other remaining bills, they raise the bar for enforcement. HCD can now refer housing elements to the Attorney General for action if they're non-compliant. In other words, there's definitely a stick with some financial penalties that go along with it this time, unlike the last previous housing element. In terms of the process for update, I'll mention them briefly. I know that Ben also was going to talk about the community survey, but essentially, we have a pandemic the past year and a half. The rules for outreach have changed, and we had to really adopt something that was more practical for the city, more practical for residents, and safe. And so the outreach consisted of several community surveys, 3 study sessions here before the City Council, the presentation of the housing element or portions of it to EDAC and AVA committees. You had a website that was dedicated to the housing element, as well as a booth at the 2021 Music and Arts Festival. But I know, Ben, in terms of the results of the survey, you had a few comments.
Yeah, so as part of the outreach efforts, we did include a number of different press releases to help gauge or gather interest in the housing element update and direct people to the city, the website, and both city staff as well for questions on the housing element update, but then also had a number of surveys done. One really kind of focused at the community at large and figuring out what kind of housing issues do they have, some concerns, what things that they would like to see discussed in the housing element. And then the other one was more tailored to renters and kind of seeing what their issues are in terms of when they're looking for a place to stay in the city of Yucaipa, what their key elements are. I will kind of just summarize. So certainly the RHNA, and we'll discuss that, is a very difficult challenge to overcome and certainly is a point of contention for many. But as part of the survey, certainly housing affordability and the inventory were key issues identified by members of the public, both in terms of those that are renting, but certainly those that also are looking to buy a home or changing of life circumstances, either moving up, looking for a bigger home for a growing family, or scaling down and necessarily or not necessarily finding suitable options that help meet that. And so cost And those related elements, despite kind of the RENA, were certainly key elements identified by Yucaipa residents in terms of housing issues. And so that is part of, I think, our goal is to make sure that we find solutions to help address some of those community-wide concerns that were identified.
So in putting together the housing element, we basically had three primary objectives. First and foremost, we wanted to make sure that the housing element meets state law. It needs to be compliant, so it can allow you to do all the other types of planning activities that you're already undertaking. Second, and also important, the housing element needed to reflect the city's and residents' concerns relative to the supply, diversity, affordability, and opportunity for housing. And finally, we wanted to make sure that the housing element was consistent with the general plan vision, with specific plan updates that you have had or are considering, and any other related planning effort. And so while your housing element is being updated and expanded, it's still, first and foremost, it has to meet what your goals are for the community. And at the same time, we want to make sure that it doesn't run afoul of state law. So as Ben has mentioned, the regional housing needs allocation is absolutely the most difficult aspect to meet in the housing element. It really drives the housing element. And what it does essentially is it sets targets for housing planning and production. I'm not going to go into great detail, but every 8 years, the state of California produces population and housing growth estimates. They project them at the state level, and they allocate it to different regions throughout the state. It comes to the Southern California region. The region's given about 1.34 million units, and those units are allocated among to all the 200 plus cities. And your allocation is about 2866. That's significantly higher than the 1,650 units that you had back in 2014. In terms of the allocation is broken into 4 different income levels. The table that you see here lists the 4 income levels: very low, low, moderate, and above. There's a definition of the income level and the number of units that are associated with those income levels. And just to give you kind of a sense of what this really translates into, very low income, about half, it's about up to 50% of the area median income, about $40,000. That's about $20 an hour. If you look at low income is about $30 an hour, moderate income is about $45 an hour, and above moderate, of course, is above that. And what you can see is, though, even though there's quite a few units under the very low and low category, your highest category actually is above moderate income. And I think the main takeaway on this is that the regional housing needs assessment overall, it's not just for very low or low, it's also for moderate and above moderate. You're really trying to meet the full range of income levels here in the city. So how do we plan for it? The housing element has 3 primary strategies. First is any approved and proposed housing project that will be built after July 1st, 2021. And you have about 50 projects currently in the hopper that's moving its way through. Secondly, if there is a deficit, I'll jump to number 3. We have accessory dwelling units and other types of creative strategies that you've developed for this housing element. And then finally, for any additional units that need to be accommodated, we can take a look at the zoning for vacant and underutilized sites throughout the city and count that development capacity. We've counted it conservatively. We've just used vacant sites, purely vacant sites here in the city, but certainly you have additional sites that are underutilized as well.
And I do want to just quickly note as well, it is on the slide, but just to reinforce it. So the RENA itself isn't necessarily a planning construction mandate. The city is not expected to go out and start building homes ourselves, but really it's more setting the environment, the building environment where it can facilitate development that meets those different income stuff. And so that's kind of where the zoning and density, making sure that there aren't impediments on subject sites that would preclude the ability for development to occur to meet those different categories.
Okay. And many of those development issues that Ben mentions, those are covered in Chapter 3 of the housing element. So let's just review quickly the status of the RENA to date. And what this chart shows is a summary of the first line is your RENA. I've grouped the very low and low together. The second line is the pipeline projects. The third is the vacant sites, and the final row is the arena balance. And what you can quickly see just by surmising this is that for your moderate and above moderate income, for this cycle, you've met your allocation. Certainly, whenever you're thinking about planning, there's always additional arena cycles. There's a 7th and 8th cycle, I know, unless that housing element law goes away. But nonetheless, for this cycle, you currently met the moderate and above moderate. The deficit primarily is in the lower income category. That's essentially multiple family projects. The numbers you see here and the deficit, it's not uncommon. Every city that I'm working with in Southern California, they're focused predominantly on the lower income category because it's the most difficult to meet. And there's usually or typically less land to work with. So in terms of addressing the shortfall, I'm going to hand off the baton to Ben. But essentially, as you had for your last housing element, multiple family housing here in the city is addressed primarily with your RM category, your RM24 category, or R24, which allows 20 to 24 dwelling units an acre. We're assuming that that category is still going to be sufficient to address your arena for that category. And so Ben can go through the 7 different strategies for that.
Yeah, so thank you. So just kind of touching base, a lot of these strategies have been developed through the prior study sessions with City Council, and a lot of the focus for the most part is leveraging existing programs that the city already has or wants to see developed and really augmenting them and enhancing them to receive RENA credit and help facilitate that development. So for example, is the Mobile Home Park Overlay District and Uptown District already allows up to 20 to 24 units per acre, but through a development opportunity reserve, which requires a separate action. And so the direction and the strategy employed here is that it would remove that kind of process and simplify the development standards and allow for that 20 to 24 units without the development opportunity reserve, which in turn allows us to claim credits for those different housing strategies. Third one is the freeway corridor specific plan. We already have housing sites designated as part of it. As council is aware, we do have the freeway corridor specific plan update occurring, and so some of the interior residential sites are going to be worked through that process. However, there are 2 R24 sites that are much more able to be facilitated for affordable housing. They do have access to existing infrastructure and streets that help minimize some of the impediments. And so in terms of that strategy, it's a carryover from the current housing element. Number 4 was the College Village Overlay District. As council may know, we do have that draft district developed. As part of the last study session, council directed staff to plan for about 100 of the total units of the approximately 400 units to be as part of the housing strategy, and so that's been included as well. Number 5 is our Oakland Road site. This is a part of a carryover of the existing housing element along Oakland Road, south of Avenue E, and then north of Colorado. We do have an R24, RM24 designated site. It's already existing, so that's proposed to remain. However, prior city council direction did include the city-owned property at the corner of Avenue E and Oakland Road in order to help kind of carry over the one existing site and improve the city-owned parcel. We did receive state grant funding to explore some of the infrastructure elements and the infrastructure design, and so these efforts in totality help better demonstrate the city's commitment to seeing this house as these sites as viable sites and not necessarily get dismissed at the state level, but then 2 also may help facilitate other development in the area, including the city's Dunlap Park, which would also benefit from those infrastructure improvements. In terms of the other strategy is number 6, accessory dwelling units. This is really carrying over existing state law that does require or allow accessory dwelling units on properties, and so maintaining that level of projection of building permits. We've received a lot of interest in ADUs, and then certainly as part of the survey results, half of the property owners indicated some interest or some significant interest in creation of ADUs. And so recognizing that the market is generally favorable towards that with individual property owners, that strategy is carried over as well. And then finally, the last one is the Commercial Development Opportunity Reserve. So given some of the different commercial properties that we have, some of them may not be as viable for commercial uses or may be oversaturated. And so with that, with that is to include a floating number to allow redevelopment. So council directed staff to include a overlay district that would cover 14th Street to 2nd Street. And then essentially, if we ever run into no net loss, one project, let's say, gets developed at a lower density or less units at the affordability range, we could in turn use that to recalibrate the development opportunity reserve rather than having to rezone another project to approve a project that we would like in the first place. I do want to know, just for the record, so as part of the strategies, both the mobile home park overlay and the Uptown District would go from the 16 units with the DOR to then allowing the 24 units to claim credit for that. And so staff did identify a number of different potential sites in the Uptown District. Because of some of the smaller lot sizes as well as some of the mixed-use components, we have calibrated the number as identified in the staff report to assume about 72 units within that strategy. There may be additional unit capacity with it, but because of other site constraints or as part of HCD review, we recognize that not every single site may be counted, but we tried to give at least enough flexibility to make sure that what ends up being built is realistic and proposed as well. And so as part of the strategies, council did identify that for the arena buffer, given some of the no net loss implications and making sure that as part of HCD's review that we have enough capacity, council did approve maintaining no more than a 15% buffer for this strategies. And so as part of the overall strategies proposed, we are consistent with that 15% buffer and do not exceed it. And so that's generally kind of the different strategies. There's other components as identified in the staff report and as part of the housing element. And then as Mark will get into, some of the different goals and policies are intended to reinforce these strategies to ensure their viability and make sure that they're counted or credited appropriately in terms of HCD's review.
Okay, so moving forward then, the housing plan really represents the commitments that the city is making in terms of moving forward with the housing element. And like it was in your prior housing element, the housing plan has 3 levels. It has a goal, which is an ideal future related to public health, safety, or general welfare. It has a series of policies which help guide decision-making. And finally, programs, which are specific commitments that are made over the next 8 years with respect to housing and related programs. And as you can probably just gather from your document, the housing element still has five goals as it has in the past. We rejiggered them slightly to address some new state law. Your housing assistance and housing choice goals are now combined, and there's a new goal for fair housing. Oh, let me jump through in terms of policies, still have about 36 policies, but you will have a few additional housing programs, and I'll highlight those in each section. So goal number 1, housing and neighborhood quality. It's intended to promote the quality of housing and neighborhoods in Yucaipa. This goal was in your prior housing element, and it's implemented through 6 programs that you see here: code enforcement, building inspections, single and multiple family home repair, crime-free multi-housing, and capital improvement programs. All of these programs were either in your housing element or existing programs that you already implemented in the past. So there's no fundamental change in direction. Number 2, housing sites. Goal HN2 is intended to ensure that there are sufficient sites for housing that allow for a range in types, tenure, and affordability of housing in the right locations. And you have 7 programs that are designed to implement that. Ben has already gone through all of those programs. The one that's actually quite unique is the Corridor Development Opportunity Reserve Program. It's a program that I have not seen, but one that actually would work quite well here in the city. Also, just to note, like all other cities, the housing sites will continue to be a focus of HCD, so we do expect comment from HCD, as we do for all of our housing elements, particularly on housing sites.
I do want to add just quickly, as part of the overall approach, a lot of this is to some degree an evolution of the existing housing element, and we're reassessing different policies and programs to ensure that they're feasible today. So we did look at the success of those programs in the past, see where they could be improved to help facilitate that. One thing I did want to note as part of the housing sites program that I wanted to mention, in the housing element for the commercial corridor, there is a site referenced as an example of a commercial site that doesn't have street frontage and not necessarily maybe a very viable commercial use, and it references that a potential user may be a storage unit type or self-storage facility, and I actually had a meeting today for a self-storage developer on that subject property. So just wanted to provide that information for City Council in terms of commercial corridors. Allowing that flexibility may help improve some of the in terms of tax base of those properties in lieu of maybe what could be proposed as well.
So in terms of the goal number 3 is housing design, and it's intended to ensure that housing is well designed, it contributes to property values, it's affordable, as well as practical and cost effective to build. And this goal is implemented through 6 expedited processing. That's to deal specifically with the time limits set up in SB 330, as well as small lot subdivisions. That one is designed to facilitate additional types of housing products that would fit more of the middle to moderate income here in the city, particularly townhome development. In terms of goal number 4, housing assistance, it's intended to ensure that the city continues to encourage, facilitate, and assist where possible the development, maintenance, and retaining of housing, and it's implemented through 6 programs. All of these programs here have been existing, either on your prior housing element or are currently being implemented, so there's no fundamental change. The final goal, HN5, is intended to ensure that the city promotes fair and equal housing opportunity. It's specifically included as a result of the passage of AB 66, and the goal is implemented through 4 different programs: housing for people with disabilities, housing for homeless people, senior housing, and fair housing services. All of these programs are currently in place in one form or the other. As I did mention, though, earlier, this is one of the focus areas of state legislation, and we do expect significant comment on this program area like we do other housing elements as well. So in terms of the typical process moving forward, we conducted a public hearing before the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission recommended that the housing element move forward for your consideration. And should you approve it here, we would commence preparation of the CEQA environmental clearance. We've already started that, and we would continue with that. The housing element would be submitted to the Department of Housing and Community Development for a mandated 60-day time frame. It would come back to the city. We can expect it to come back. We'll have some additional comments, and we'll be working back and forth with HED to work out any differences and make the revisions. And then once we get a clean letter, it'll be a letter of contingent approval. It'll come back to you and the Planning Commission for public hearings, Planning Commission to recommend approval, and for you to actually adopt the housing element. And with that?
Yeah, so I do want to just kind of summarize very quickly. So the draft housing element was provided at a study session at the Planning Commission last week at their regular meeting. They did recommend approval. They did like a lot of the policies and programs proposed. There were, I think, 2 notable comments. One is to include a kind of glossary of different acronyms, since we in the planning field certainly like our acronyms. And then the second one was just kind of reinforcing the ADU discussion of, since a lot of it's preempted by state law already, there may be some elements that we can do to facilitate it, but making sure that HCD doesn't I guess, involuntarily restrict the number of ADUs that we may get credit for just because it's preempted by state law. And so making sure that that's at least recognized by that state reviewer that's going to be working on our housing element. But otherwise, they were excited for the housing element and certainly interested to see council's discussion as well. And that concludes our presentation.
All right. So are there any questions or comments for staff?
You mentioned a grant for infrastructure for that site along Oakland Road south of Avenue E. Tell me more about that, or what is that all about?
So that was part of the state's local, or it's like local early applicant, or it's the LEAP grant. I'm blanking on the acronym just now, but it was a grant, and part of it is twofold. We did a cultural resources study on the city-owned property to see if there's any cultural resources that may preclude development on that, or at least minimize the disruption to it. And so certainly working with our tribal partners, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians on that. But the second part is doing the utility infrastructure design for those sites. So as part of the development of that entire Oakland Road corridor, including the existing R24, the neighborhood commercial, and then the city-owned property and the Dunlap Park, making sure that those utility plans are kind of developed so we can have projects more shovel-ready, so to speak, for individual builders that move forward, at least removing some of those unknown elements, and at least making sure that they have a plan to kind of work off to make them more viable.
So that area there that we're looking at in the past, I mean, years ago, we designated 3 locations for, and I'm not sure I understand what low income looks like. I know the number up there was $40,000 a year, but are we looking at certain locations for that? And is that going to be subsidized housing? Are we talking about a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, or a 2-bedroom, 2-bath for $800 a month? Is that what we're required to do, or what does that look like? Because what area are we going to put housing like that in? Along Oakland Road there? Is that what we have in mind?
So a couple of questions there, if I may. Number one, part of the challenge this go-around that's, I would say, at least exacerbated, maybe it's, wasn't as much, certainly wasn't as much of a challenge in previous housing element processes, is that the state is going to look at those housing element sites that were approved in the last cycle and ask why they didn't get built. And if they come to the conclusion that they're not feasible for some reason or other, then they don't count towards, they may not count, or at least portions may not count, towards the 2,886 units that were obligated over the next 8 years to see through. And so part of the exercise of getting the infrastructure designed, whether it's along Oakland Road for those that housing element site and the city site next to it and the other development in that area, or the freeway corridor itself, we need to be able to make the case with HCD that we are making progress on those impediments to that development in order to get those units counted, whether it's the Oakland Road units or it's the freeway corridor specific plan units. And that's part of the reason why the freeway corridor specific plan number was reduced from the last housing element site, assuming we're going to get some credit but not all credit for those units. In terms of affordability, up until now, the state has agreed that allowing for densities of 20 to 24 units per acre meets our obligation in terms of providing those sites that are adequate number and zoned properly in order to meet the obligation in the very low and low categories of income levels. But as you said, the very low is in the $40,000 a year range. The low, I think, was $60,000 a year. And so these, especially the $60,000 a year range, are really first-time teachers, first-time firemen, first-time police officers. So in terms of the low range, those are certainly folks that, are in our community in those careers.
So those type of projects, obviously those are multi-units, those are apartments. Those type of projects, do they pencil out at 3 stories without having a ladder truck? Do they pencil out on what number of units do you have to have per project for $800 a month? Or I don't know what the rent is on a person making $40,000 a year, but does that project ever pencil out financially?
So there are a number of projects that are in process that at least they would suggest they pencil out in terms of market rate. There's a number of those, especially senior projects, because they have lesser requirements for parking and that sort of thing. But as you've seen in some of our partnerships, they don't all pencil out. Some of them do require the gap funding, and usually with the gap funding goes the obligation to keep it at certain income levels, and certainly keep it at the restricted ages, if that's the case. So, but there are some projects going through the process that believe that they pencil out.
I do want to note as well, as part of our efforts to remove some of those impediments and certainly keep our existing sites in play and augment them as necessary. We have taken other steps to help kind of remove those impediments. One thing that is noted on here, we did receive a grant through STAD that we're working with STAD staff, is the establishment of enhanced infrastructure financing districts as an example of a way to help provide some of that gap funding for infrastructure development that may otherwise keep a project from penciling out, and providing that additional tool, so to speak, for developers to help see those projects come to fruition. So as part of overall efforts the city has done is to help make sure that we are not the impediment for that, and certainly where we can find solutions to keep projects moving forward and provide that measure, then we've done so. And so we tried to reflect that in the housing element as well for HCD's consideration as well.
And even the freeway corridor specific plan update itself represents perhaps a better penciling out for those housing element sites, because it will ultimately incorporate the reconciliation with the open space and hillside ordinance changes that council made a few years ago, more than a few years ago now. And so that'll result in that, together with some of the other changes in the hillside ordinance that are being considered, may make that more feasible, those projects more feasible as well, in addition to the working on the infrastructure along the way.
So once we identify, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Once we identify, re-identify these locations, just like we went to Vegas looking for commercial development, maybe it would behoove us to go to BIA shows or go to some kind of convention to find builders that are looking for projects like that would pencil out for whatever income level we're looking at. Because this is a real serious situation. If we're going to, and I say this to my colleagues as well as staff, and everybody knows this, but if we're going to be serious about this, we're going to have to be very cooperative with whatever builders we have, and we're going to have to go looking diligently for opportunities to meet these lower and moderate, or whatever the terms are, very low and low income level housing, and put them in the right spot, and then again manage them properly, because I know Mayor Bogue is kind of sensitive to the fact that apartments like that sort of go downhill pretty quick, and I agree with that if they're not managed properly, but this is something we've got to take very seriously going forward, and I'm sure everyone agrees with that, but I just keep reiterating it.
Agreed.
All right, so any other comments or questions?
Last time I remember you guys talking about the property on Oakland, there was a fault line survey going on. Has that been completed? Are we okay to build there, or is that going to be an issue?
So, good question. We've done some more research since then. It appears as though we're trying to kind of take a final look at the studies and the field work, but it appears as though there were actually field work associated with those studies that indicated that there was not a fault line in that property or the adjacent property. And so we're trying to finalize that research, but it appears as though that was cleared.
Really? Wow, that's good news.
John or Dave? John, you have anything? David?
No, I don't, not right now.
Okay. Are we good at this point then?
If there are
It
no
is
other.
just a study session.
A study session and a request to forward this to HCD for review by HCD, approval, if you will, of the draft housing element at this point.
I'm good.
I really appreciate the work you guys are doing on this. Really, really a great report. I read through most of it, and it's a good report, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you guys good? It's a study session, so no action required, right?
No action other
Just
than
consensus
clear
to
clear
move
consensus
it.
to go ahead
Yep.
and submit this to HCD.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, so that moves us on to item number 16. And I believe this has been another study session.
That it is. So this is a study session regarding fuel stations and car washes in Yucaipa, and consideration perhaps of a moratorium of such uses if that is the direction of council. Do want to just kind of give a quick history lesson of alternative fuel vehicles. So as part of electric cars, or kind of the changing of the market, electric cars are actually a new topic. They were first part of the original cars built in the 1800s, 1881. There's an electric car there. And certainly as part of the development of infrastructure and fuel stations, it slowly waned from being the predominant automotive kind of landscape, and certainly became more of a niche kind of element. So you can see kind of the little city car in the 1970s, obviously not a very cool vehicle, but certainly something that people were kind of tinkering with. And then certainly more of the modern era, electric cars started growing in. So top picture shows the General Motors EV1, which was kind of a unique car and had a lot of fan favorites. And then certainly everyone is aware of the Tesla Model S, really kind of set electric cars as being kind of a cool, hip element. And then right now we're kind of in this big growing shift in the automotive landscape of electric vehicles really coming to fruition. So these are different cars that are either currently in production or about to hit showrooms, including the Ford Mustang Mach-E and the Ford Lightning pickup truck, the Porsche Taycan, the Ioniq, the Hyundai Ioniq 5, and then the Rivian RT1. So there's now electric cars kind of for all these markets. And then not to mention a number of different plug-in hybrids that have also improved fuel consumption. And so with that kind of begs the question of if the market is transitioning more to electric vehicles, taking over that lens, does it make sense to necessarily have more fuel stations and those kind of related infrastructure elements developed? The city of Yucaipa currently has 11 gas stations in operation, 3 under construction, 2 that have been approved, and then 1 that is, or 2 that are also currently proposed as well. And then similar to the gas stations is we do have 8 existing car washes, 3 that have been approved, and then the 1 that is also proposed. And so with that, we are presenting this for council's consideration, whether or not as part of this growing shift of industry, where perhaps fuel stations and the demand for gas stations maybe isn't as popular, whether or not seeing commercial land being developed for such a use where that popularity may decline in the next couple, 2 decades, is perhaps a moratorium or kind of capping off that. Staff does, however, recognize that the freeway corridor is kind of a element of the city that is in development and still working through that. And so staff does request probably an exemption or recommend that an exemption for the freeway corridor specific plan probably be included, but certainly within the interior of the city. Wanted to provide this study session just for council's consideration and discussion. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, so are there any comments or suggestions for staff?
So the concept that electric vehicles are replacing gas vehicles, and that because of that, we should maybe limit car washes at gas stations or car washes altogether? Because electric vehicles get dirty as well as gas engines, or gas-driven cars.
So the car wash is more included just as an additional item. There has been some community concern about the number of car washes as well, and so that's provided kind of both. But certainly the impetus for the fuel stations is a little bit different than the car wash facilities. But certainly these new facilities with express washes are designed to turn cars quicker than, older, self-serve kind of car washes. And so certainly that technology has shifted to allow cars to move through the process more quickly than in years past.
So I'm opposed to moratoriums altogether, and my idea of telling someone they can't build something if they've got the money to do it and they want to take a chance on building another car wash, I don't agree with that at all. That's like, there's too many patios in Chapman Heights, so therefore we should put a moratorium on patios. I just don't think that's a good idea to restrict people if they own the land or they buy the land to build something, that we should restrict that whatsoever.
All right. Who wants to go next?
I can go. One of the things about such industries such as gas stations and car washes, I think would be driven by the economics. At what point does it become too many gas stations where the economic indicators showing that we're not catching the revenue as we used to? As you said yourself, electric cars are starting to come up. The need for gasoline stations are starting to drop. But do we have anything that suggests that that's what's happening now? And the other thing is, in terms of car washes, and I'm going to be flying around different directions here for a second. I just got done talking to a woman before the meeting today with Vector Control. They just opened up a car wash in Redlands, and she indicated that they just can't get enough car washes. The demand is so high. Everyone's just getting land and putting car washes on them. So it seems like the demand is there. And to put a moratorium on car washes when there's a demand for it, doesn't make sense. I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Duncan is that let the economics drive the need for car washes or the need to not have any more car washes. Are we doing anything? Have we done any studies? Or is there anything out there that suggests that there's a significant rise in hybrids and electric vehicles in our region, specifically the Yucaipa area? Because I've been trying to promote electrification facilities to charge for, charging stations. And the council, previous to this one, has been reluctant to move forward with that. And is this time for us to consider that? Encourage private enterprise as well as some public facilities, public access. So again, I'm kind of rambling around a little bit, but the bottom line is I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Duncan that we should unless there's some economic need. And then one more final thing. We have some opportunities in the future that will include having a gasoline station. And I hate to put a moratorium on gasoline stations that might affect our ability to seal some deals with future development in our community.
All right. Anyone else want to go, or?
I think the staff has appropriately addressed the potential future development as it relates to a moratorium on gas stations, specifically with the freeway corridor specific plan being, or having wording that excludes any development in that area. This is something that and maybe perhaps I'm alone, have been asked about from several of our constituents. We're cluttered with gas stations, and we're not so large to need it. Every time the ground is broken, the question is asked either on social media or at some of the cafes in town, what's going there? And quickly and almost sarcastically, it's quipped back with what's probably gonna be a gas station or a tire shop, because that's what Yucaipa is good at. And I have to say, I agree. Look at the map. That is, and I haven't gone to a gas station in Yucaipa where I've had to wait in line, and I drive a diesel. And there's only like 3 pumps at most gas stations for diesel. And I'm still right up there to get my fuel. So I agree that if I found myself having to wait at a gas station for 5, 6, 7 cars in line in order to get my fuel, I might be frustrated as to why we don't have more to accommodate. That doesn't seem to be the case in my mind. I think that we are littering our city with service stations that at some point, and I'm not entirely sold on the fact that hybrid vehicles or electric cars are going to be replacing these service stations. I'm not going to stop driving my fossil fuel diesel, but I think that we are littering our city. And should I be wrong and that these are going by the wayside, I think there are some environmental considerations as it relates to modifying these businesses to something else. I think there's actually quite a nominal cost to converting a fuel station into something else. Soil surveys and whatnot. I actually have to disagree with Mayor Pro Tem Duncan. I also don't like big government telling private persons what they can and can't do on their land. But at the same time, if somebody was to come before this council and say they want to have a marijuana grow on some private property and license it through the state and everything, I would say, no, I don't agree with that. So I think drawing a hard line that the private property belongs to somebody and they should be able to develop it as they see fit, I don't think that's accurate either. I agree with this. I think that our city has enough service stations, and I think our open commercial land would be better fit developing into something that could be more beneficial to the city.
You want to go, or do you want me to go, or?
I'm not fond of moratoriums either. However, I would like to see when businesses come into our city, we have a more balanced approach sometimes on some of the different businesses that come in. I have had comments like Justin, where people talk about, we seem like we have a certain genre of businesses that we allow into our our city and we just kind of stick with it, you know, whether it be a drugstore, a car wash, a gas station, or a coffee shop. And kind of the same genre over and over again. But I don't like the idea of telling people they can't put something in. I mean, I think that we might be shooting ourselves in the foot if we put a moratorium in place.
Okay. Well, I'm on the side of Councilmember Avila and Mayor Pro Tem Duncan that I don't think we should have a moratorium. I think the market should dictate what goes in. My only concern is, I think you're right. I think we are moving more towards electric stations, and I'm not opposed to gas stations going in. But I am a little concerned that if we did build a number of gas stations and everything converted to electric, now we have a bunch of empty gas stations. So I don't know, maybe a proposal that if a gas station stays vacant for X amount of years, it needs to be removed and put back to the original landscape. Just an idea. I'm not necessarily that it's what my proposal is. I'm just throwing it out there that maybe we could just get rid of the gas station if it's been set vacant. There's a number of gas stations in town that have been sitting there for 40 years vacant, and I'd hate to see that happen. But I am opposed to a moratorium. I think the market should dictate what goes in.
And really and truly, there is no such thing as a gas station. It's a convenience store. They're every one of them. There is no gas station in Yucaipa. There's a convenience store that serves gas and water to wash your car, basically, right? I mean, and as long as you've got convenience stores, people are going to stop and buy Gatorade when it's hot.
All right, so I'm not sure, do you have clear direction, Ray?
We do, thank you, yes.
All right. Anyway, you want to add anything else? You guys good? All right, so that takes us to announcements. Are there any announcements?
When's our next festival? Is that Autumn Fest coming up? Autumn Fest?
It is. Do you know the dates in Autumn Fest? We can get that out to you, but it's, that's the next festival coming up.
Our market, our farmers market's dying very quickly. I don't know if it's because, well, it is, it's dying. Every week it's one less or two less vendors. This past week it was really, really bad. So I suspect that that's going to be gone soon, but there's going to be another one starting down by 14th Street or 12th Street.
The TAD Center.
Huh?
Yeah.
At the TAD Center.
Yeah. There's going to be another one starting, and Stacy Boiserank is in charge of that. I don't think that'll die. She's a pretty aggressive gal.
I'd like to say that we had our CERT program start back up, our Community Emergency Response Team training last Saturday. It was successful. We had to use, there was considerably less participants due to COVID, and we had to provide the spacing, to keep everybody safe. And we are opening up our volunteer programs where we have participation. The Sound the Alarm is going to come back strong, and we have certain, I think we need to recognize Sherry O'Connell for her efforts in working and bringing everything back up to speed. I wish she was here where she could hear it firsthand, but we have an excellent person at the helm that's driving this. I know she does more beyond CERT and Sound the Alarm, and she's working with PD on things. I'm just very proud of her and glad to work with her on all these programs. And I just want to give some formal recognition to her. Thank you.
We'll pass that along. Thank you very much.
John, you have anything? Anyone? All right, so that takes us to closed session, and we do have a number of items.
We do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've got 3 items on this evening's closed session. First is conference with legal counsel regarding potential and anticipated litigation, 1 case. And then 2 cases for conference with real property negotiator. The first regarding the property 32335 Live Oak Canyon. City's negotiators, Mr. Casey, negotiating parties Live Oak Canyon Investments, and that's price and terms of payment. The second is 32095 Live Oak Canyon Road Again, city's negotiators, Mr. Casey, negotiating parties, Palmer General Corp., under negotiation price and terms of disposition of property by city. We would not expect reportable action this evening.
All right, with that, we will adjourn this city council meeting.
You did a stellar job on that, buddy, I swear. 3 hours. Did you record?